morning. It is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Will, for very good morning from me as well.
The police watchdog urges people not to speculate about Henry Nowak's murder as Hampshire's Chief Constable rejects suggestions of two-tier policing.
Israel and Lebanon agreed to a ceasefire deal, which the US says is contingent on Hezbollah stopping attacks.
A lifeline for hundreds of women with ovarian cancer as a new treatment is approved for NHS use.
Also today, the build-up to the World Cup as attention turns to England and Scotland, and we'll be joined to discuss it all with the broadcaster Jim White.
And the alleged boss of one of Scotland's biggest organised crime gangs faces trial in Amsterdam after being arrested in Bali.
Very good morning to you. The UK's police watchdog has urged people not to speculate about the murder of Henry Nowak. The head of the Independent Office for Police Conduct says it could prejudice the investigation and risk Henry's family not getting the answers they deserve.
Now, this heartbreaking image is 18-year-old Henry in handcuffs after being fatally stabbed by the man who killed him, a person who falsely accused him of racist abuse.
We'll be examining the impact of his murder on community division in the programme this morning. The centre of the tragedy is, of course, a grieving family who have called for Henry's death not to be used to create further tension or hatred. That particular point was a topic that came up during some heated exchanges in Parliament yesterday, in particular between the Prime Minister and the Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and ask for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable.
Chief Constable of Hampshire in the Isle of Wight Constabulary has rejected claims of two-tier policing.
Part of what the IOPC will look at is what was in our minds at that time, what impacted the decisions we made. That's got to run its course. What I would say, and I think where you're going there is, do we have a two-tier type policing system? I would refute that. I would say absolutely not. I see officers day in, day out on the grounds serving without fear or favour all our communities. And I think that's the case nationally. I appreciate other people have a different view, but that's my view. So be really clear, I do not think policing is racist. There are racist individuals within policing, of course there are, and there have always been, and we will tackle that and deal with it. But it is not any anti-community.
Well, at that debate on two-tier policing, on the lessons to be learned from the tragic death of Henry Nowak is going to continue today. We'll be talking to the government about that in about 10 minutes' time.
I think it is really important, obviously, to let the police investigation run its course to draw any real conclusions long-term. I do think there's a nuance, though, to this. Unequivocally, whilst the court case was running, no one could or should have said anything because you really could prejudice that particular case and the murderer might possibly have got off. We're not talking about a formal legal process with the police investigation now, and I think it is completely fair for the nation, forget individual politicians pointing fingers, to start to discuss what is clearly being discussed by everyone around their dinner tables at this point, though the firm conclusions about the individual police officers and about the lessons that have to be learned can't be made until that internal investigation is carried out. But it's more nuanced now. It's not as black and white as it was when the court case was continuing, where you could not and should not talk about it.
Yeah, and when these terrible crimes, and this was such a terrible crime, happen, it is natural and right that there is a debate that's sparked after that as well.
Exactly.
We'll continue, of course, the coverage of Henry Nowak's murder throughout the programme. But in the meantime, another story to update you on today, because Darren Jones, very, very close cabinet ally of Keir Starmer, in leaked messages, told Lord Mandelson he was so sorry to see him sacked as US ambassador. Obviously, he was sacked, of course, in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. These messages not released as part of the humble address, but leaked to The Spectator.
The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister had previously said he no longer had access to messages that he sent to Mandelson. Ali's here with us now to discuss this. Ali, I guess first let's talk about the content of some of these messages. What jumps out to you?
I mean, I think the first thing to say is, it's a Cabinet Office that have been coordinating the release of all these messages, and this is the guy that is in charge, effectively, of the Cabinet Office. Of course, the Intelligence and Security Committee have been overseeing it all, but that is part of this. He's also really close to the Prime Minister. I'll run you through some of the most interesting ones. I mean, Sophie, that was the one that really stands out in terms of when Peter Mandelson resigned, the day he resigned, over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Darren Jones, this is what The Spectator's saying, messaged him, "You've been doing such a great job and you work wonders with Trump. I'm so sorry today." So this was when Peter Mandelson was sacked, resigned.
This is after he was sacked for his links to Jeffrey Epstein paedophile, right? I mean, it is quite something.
Yeah, it is. And, I mean, got to say, this is The Spectator. I haven't stood this up. I'm trying to. But, yeah, this is after he was sacked. And then beyond that, there is, more of those sorts of embarrassing behind-the-curtains messages we've seen, sort of effectively slagging off his colleagues, semi-critical, talk about losing faith in Jonathan Reynolds, from Business Secretary's advisors, says it doesn't fill you with confidence that Johnny Reynolds and Rachel Reeves are in charge of growth plans. So I think that sort of speaks to what the Foreign Secretary called unedifying messages. And also, and I have to say, I've been in Parliament a lot this week, there are plenty of people who think we're getting too much information, we're seeing too far behind the curtains. People should be able to talk about their colleagues on WhatsApp without having it on the front pages. And then this is also really interesting. This is about how Peter Mandelson managed to weave his way into areas well beyond his brief, because these messages show that he was seeking the thoughts and advice of Peter Mandelson on reshuffle and talking about how the jobs he hoped to get were Business Secretary, Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband's job. He also said, I'd also like MOD, Ministry of Defence, John Healey, but I think it's unlikely. So, yeah, getting advice from Peter Mandelson well beyond Peter Mandelson's brief.
He's also quite critical of Johnny Reynolds. Of all the people, that kind of jumps out, he's most critical of. And that's quite interesting because they're both sort of seen as sort of similar bedfellows in their politics, and they're kind of two key chiefs to the Prime Minister at the moment, a Chief Secretary and a Chief Whip. So that's quite interesting and revealing. But to your point about whether things should be released or not, and I don't know why this wasn't released and a whole load of similar personal WhatsApps for other people was released, and I don't know the answer to that question. But it is another reminder of a whole load of stuff, even the one that is embarrassing on the day that Mandelson stepped down. They're not. None of these are about the appointment of Peter Mandelson.
I would argue that I totally agree that the stuff about where he's moaning about Johnny Reynolds and stuff, irrelevant. I think someone this senior in government saying he's so sorry to see Mandelson sacked for his links to Epstein is actually kind of illuminating if we're looking at whether or not this government swept under the carpet and didn't take seriously the links between Mandelson and Epstein. That one, I think, is actually legitimate.
I'm not. I completely can see that, and that one is embarrassing. I still think you kind of pause, and it is how are people going to continue to operate in government? I mean, basically, if you're in government right now, you're probably, whether this lasts forever or just 6 months, you're just, it's just not worth using WhatsApp.
And we now know that the Prime Minister's spokesperson confirmed he has disappearing messages, but they've said that he's kept within the guidelines, which is all about record keeping.
But this whole process.
I mean, it's also the question is, what else don't we have?
But this whole process is what triggers disappearing
messages. Has messaged Peter.
This last week, I've been thinking,
get him on.
No, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah.
And by the way, so we've got there's sort of two outcomes. One is you have frozen government and we don't make the use of technology, which can make all businesses much more efficient. You have to wait till the in-person meeting to discuss things. Or you put on disappearing messages.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not saying that once this process began in the way that it began, you have to publish everything, be transparent, particularly for a government that enforced the same thing on Partygate and the same thing on the last government. But maybe we can come out of this with some kind of plan of action going forward that delivers efficiency and transparency, because I think this is an absurd situation. Really.
Those messages go so quickly. You check a message from an MP just to check a quote, and it's literally gone within 24 hours. And you're like, oh my God. So
I know, then you forget where you're meeting someone.
Yeah, I'm finding that a lot at the moment.
Yeah. Ali, thanks very much. Really interesting.
Now, the US State Department has announced that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to renew their ceasefire. A truce was meant to be in place in April, but hostilities have continued.
So the joint statement from Israel and the US says the new deal is dependent on an end to fighting between Hezbollah and the Israeli military. It was brokered in talks with Washington, but look, the crucial thing is Hezbollah has not agreed to the terms and they weren't involved in the negotiations.
Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons joins us in Jerusalem. Adam, how significant a step is this?
It's significant that this ceasefire has been renewed, but it raises so many questions. When you have a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah is not involved in the negotiation of that, well, you don't have to be the United Nations to work out that that's a fairly fundamental flaw. And Hezbollah has been pretty antagonistic towards these talks. So I think they are, the word fragile has been used for these ceasefires again and again, and this one definitely looks fragile. It's dependent, of course, upon the extent to which Iran, which funds and trains Hezbollah, is going to enforce it. But it's also vague, frankly, in actually what it says is going to happen on the ground. It talks about pilot areas where the Lebanese military will be in control. We don't know where they are. We don't really know what that control looks like. And we don't know how those would be arranged in southern Lebanon. There's no talk in this about a concrete timetable for Israel withdrawing from Lebanon. The Lebanese Health Ministry says that 3,500 people have been killed by Israel during this latest round of fighting, and that around 1 million people have been displaced. And of course, Israel is occupying a vast amount of land in Lebanon. And the ceasefire, as it is at the moment, has not stopped Israel killing people as recently as yesterday, and it hasn't stopped Hezbollah firing rockets towards northern Israel or drones towards Israeli soldiers. So, look, there's always that cliche that war is better than war. But there are so many questions that are unanswered that this, at the moment, feels like a triumph of optimism, but it does feel as if it is going to be fragile.
Adam, as ever, thanks so much. Adam Parsons there for us in Jerusalem.
Now, NHS staff could be banned from wearing political badges on their uniforms, so things like pro-Palestinian symbols. It's part of proposals to help tackle anti-Semitism in the health service. It's
one of several recommendations in a review by the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann. He says the current system needs a major overhaul, and Jewish patients and staff face routine ostracism in the service. So just to have a look now at some of those recommendations. Firstly, the government says it's introducing mandatory anti-Semitism training for NHS leaders within 6 months. It's also bringing in clear national guidance on how staff should respond to racist behaviour from members of the public. And finally, it will be publishing a new set of staff standards to better hold trust to account, to set minimum expectations for how they can prevent, respond to and learn from racist incidents. We'll be hearing from Lord Mann a little later in the programme at 9:40. Now, hundreds of women with advanced ovarian cancer are being offered a lifeline today with a new life-extending therapy approved for use. So it's the first new treatment for the disease to be added to the NHS in more than 20 years, so a really big deal. Our correspondent Phoebe's here with more on this big development, Phoebe.
Absolutely. So ovarian cancer affects about 7,500 women every year, and this new treatment will hopefully change the lives of about 400 of those women who have an advanced form of the condition. Being diagnosed at a latter stage is pretty common with ovarian cancer. The symptoms are quite hard to pick up, so often women find themselves at those advanced stages. But for the last 20 years, chemotherapy has been the thing that's been used to really tackle it. And many people will know debilitating side effects are a byproduct of chemotherapy. But this new drug is incredibly targeted. It's for people who have a specific type of ovarian, fallopian tube and peritoneal cancer, which is resistant to that chemotherapy. So it's a targeted therapy. It's incredibly specific. It's not scattergun. It attaches itself to those cancer cells and then destroys them. It's called a Trojan horse mechanism. And these clinical trials that have been happening have shown to increase the average lifespan of women by about 4 months. But we can hear a little bit now from the CEO of the Overcome charity who told us about this drug.
This treatment gives hope and quality of life and length of life to people at point of platinum resistance. So when the treatments that are available previously were just not working. But also it means that because this is the first ever treatment for platinum resistant ovarian cancer, it actually gives hope to the whole community.
It just makes you realise, doesn't it, how fast things are developing when it comes to cancer. You know, chemotherapy not the only option. There are these other more targeted drugs coming onto the market too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things like breast cancer, that's something that's, evolving incredibly rapidly. There's these targeted treatments that can latch onto the specific traits of cancers and really get to grips with them rather than, as I said, that kind of scattergun approach of chemotherapy.
Phoebe, great stuff. Thanks so much. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be speaking to the government, and also coming up at 7:30, we'll be talking to the banned US commentator Cenk Uygur. That's coming up at past after a conversation with the government shortly.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Good to have you back with us. Again, pleased to say that we're joined now by Lucy Rigby, Chief Secretary to the Treasury here for the government, of course. I'm keen to start on the fallout from the appalling murder of Henry Nowak and the conversation that's been sparked around policing. Do you think we have two-tier policing in the UK?
No.
And why is that?
Well, because, I mean, really fundamentally, I think that is a slur on the thousands of police officers that go out to work every day
putting themselves in harm's way to serve the public, to try and prevent crime and to keep us all safe. So I think that the suggestion, in light of that we have two-tier policing, which suggests at its heart that the police are, on a sort of systemic basis, putting the interests of one group above another, I genuinely think is a slur on all those police officers that are serving this country day and night, 7 days a week.
Is there an argument that the framework that the police are operating in has created an unequal system? I'm thinking about, for example, the NPCC guidance that says not everyone should be treated equally. The Times and Telegraph reporting today that police officers in Hampshire felt pressured by mandatory diversity training. 1 in 7 felt controlled or pressured to feel certain ways.
I think, and to be fair, so I should have started by saying, actually, in relation to Henry Nowak, you will have seen the footage in the same way that I have of the last moments of his life, and I think that's just, entirely harrowing and just so tragic. And I, felt utterly devastated, and I think the Prime Minister is responding to that in exactly the right way by suggesting that there are these really serious questions to answer, and that process has begun. That leads me to the guidance that you referred to, the NPCC guidance, and there's also the IOPC investigation as well, which is going on. Look, I think it's the right thing to do that guidance is looked at, because the fundamental principle, as you know, that we have in this country is equality before the law. That is, a fundamental British value up there with respect and tolerance and fairness and democracy and everything else that, makes me proud to be British and, frankly, makes this country great. But equality before the law is the key. And so I think once you've set that as the bedrock, everything needs to stem from that.
And do you agree with the argument that some have been making that there isn't equality before the law because of some of this diversity framework, that different groups should be treated differently?
I think I'm right in saying that ministers in the Home Office have said, in relation to the piece of guidance that you're referring to, the NPCC guidance, that there may well be a section of it where the wording is clumsy. I think they've said, and needs to be, which Sarah's wrong. There you go. So that will be looked at. But as I said, I think, in relation to that piece of guidance, but also much more broadly and right across the piece in every single area of government and indeed our wider society, the fundamental principle is equality before the law.
I wondered if I might be to talk to you about messages that have been released today, leaked to The Spectator, between Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, and Peter Mandelson. Now, there's a whole load of gossipy ones that, honestly, I'm not going to get into because I don't think it's worth it. But there is one that I did want to get your view on, because it was sent after Peter Mandelson was sacked for his relationship and his friendship with the paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. He said, after that sacking, "You've been doing such a great job and you worked wonders with Trump. I'm so sorry about today." How does it make you feel, that message?
Look, I confess I've not seen I'm taking at face value the fact that is a full and complete message, and I've not seen the others, indeed the gossipy ones that you refer to. You asked me how I feel about that. Not great is the honest answer. But look, I think Darren has been clear, including in the chamber, how he feels about this entire episode, how he feels in particular about Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And I think he's asked himself, he's been clear about this, some quite serious questions in the way that you would want he and all of us, frankly, to ask about what's happened
I guess the
here.
problem is, right, and look, we need to get Darren Jones's right of reply, and I'm sure he will come out and defend himself, right? It's important to say that. But as an outsider, as a woman, I guess you look at it and you're like, do you actually believe that? If you're saying, "Oh, I'm really sorry that you just got sacked from being mates with a paedophile," no?
Look, I think I'm wary of talking about something which I've only just heard, and I sort of, as I said, I'm taking it at face value. But I think Darren will respond to this, and he'll speak for himself. But
is there a wider
I've just told
issue?
you how I feel about it. That's my sort of instinctive reaction.
Taking Darren Jones away, is there a wider issue about how seriously Westminster and men in Westminster take the abuse of women?
Look, I think, like, my totally honest view, Sophie, is that this isn't a Westminster problem. This is frankly, what the Jeffrey Epstein saga reveals about gender dynamics right round the world, actually, but in particular involving some of the most powerful people in the world, in some cases allegedly. That makes me pretty angry, and I'm not prone to feelings of violence or indeed anything else, but it, makes
Is it like how
angry.
men talk to other men when women aren't in the room?
Look, I mean, there's been a lot said about this, hasn't there? And look, I think there needs to be a continued period of reflection on everything that the Epstein saga reveals, as I said, which is much bigger than Westminster. It's much bigger than the UK. This is about gender dynamics right across the piece.
You're here talking about a plan to get Britain building.
I am.
Growth. Talk to us about it. What's the idea?
So today the mayoral council is convening in York, and devolution is at the heart of our regional growth plan. So that in the mayoral council, the Prime Minister's there today, the Chancellor is there as well, which is a symbol, frankly, of how important devolution is to this government. So when I talk about regional growth, that is growth not just in a few postcodes, not just in the southeast, but growth genuinely right across this country. So we're devolving power, we're devolving the largest amount of power actually in a generation. We are devolving in a fiscal sense as well, so giving mayoral strategic authorities the power to take some of the share of particular taxes. We'll be talking about that today, but we're also putting a huge amount of money into regional transport so that we can boost productivity. The gap in productivity terms between London and Leeds, for example, or London and Manchester is much, much bigger than between Paris and Toulouse or Paris and Lyon. So we know that we need to get growth going right across this country. That is behind our devolution agenda, and the Prime Minister and the Chancellor will be talking about it.
Do we just need to start building an awful lot more as well? Because you look at the stats, you promised 1.5 million new homes, and the net additional dwellings figures for 24 to 25, just 200,000. That's less than the year before. That's
an ambitious target, our 1.5.
Ambitious is one way of putting it.
It was ambitious, but we should be ambitious, right? And we should be ambitious right across the piece for this country, not just when it comes to building homes, but I just mentioned transport. All kinds of infrastructure. There's for too long been an attitude in this country that we can't build things, that there are sort of the blockers are too powerful, and that applies everywhere. And we are, ever since we got into government, we've been making a huge effort to tear down those barriers to growth. There's a lot of that in the Planning Act, and you talked about the numbers when it comes to housing. We're building a lot more affordable housing as well. You wouldn't expect to see the sort of house building in a kind of linear trajectory, because some of those initial reforms that we made when we came into government, including the Planning Act, are really important to enable that the trajectory can really take off. But the key is growth in every single corner of the country. And to your question, do we need to build? Yes, we do.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Lucy Rigby speaking to us there.
Now, two US left-wing broadcasters have been banned from entering the UK by the Home Office. Cenk Uygur and Hassan Piker were supposed to be speaking at an arts and tech festival in London this week, but both of their ETAs have been cancelled at the request of the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. The Home Office said the reason was on the grounds that their presence in the UK might not be conducive to the public good. That's the reason why these things can be cancelled. We can speak now to Cenk Uygur, who joins us from Los Angeles. Many thanks in particular because, of course, you're not on our time zone because you're not here and have stayed up late for us. Good evening to you there. Good morning from London. Can you tell us when and how exactly you learnt about this decision from the UK Home Office?
Yeah, I went to the airport. I had an ETA left over from last year because I had come and spoken at London and Oxford last year. And so we were going to do it again. And they told me that I'd been rejected by the British government, which I didn't quite understand. Literally, I thought maybe it was a bureaucratic snafu. And then 15 minutes later, the Times piece came out saying that I'd been banned basically for criticizing Israel, which I thought to be curious since I wasn't going to Israel.
Do you think it's legitimate for a sovereign nation to make decisions like this, even if the explanation behind that decision is questionable?
Well, look, of course, a sovereign country can make any decision it likes. So the Russians can decide to invade Ukraine. The Chinese can decide to put people in concentration camps. Or you could decide to do anything you want. But the question is, what should you do, especially a country like the United Kingdom, which is the home of freedom in a lot of ways, the home of the Magna Carta and Western civilization in a lot of ways. And does this look like freedom? And I have the same opinions on this issue that probably a great majority of British citizens have. So what's next? Are we going to take their freedom away next? You could have any kind of government you want, but it's up to the British citizens to decide what that government is, because you still live nominally for now in a democracy.
As I mentioned in the intro, you know, the explanation for why an ETA can be revoked is on the grounds that your presence might not be conducive to the public good. I mean, what do you say to that?
Okay, it's both a little bit haunting and hilarious at the same time. So if I step out in London streets, is mayhem going to break out? This is absurd. I was in London and Oxford, as I said, last year, and I don't remember riots breaking out. And you should know what my real views are. I'm for nonviolence, period. We're a peace movement. We hate the idea of any civilians being harmed under any circumstance. I'm on the left. My governing philosophy is that everyone is equal. Race and religion don't matter at all. And I'm an atheist, so I believe we're all Homo sapiens. The idea that someone's religion or race would make a difference, I find to be hilarious. So I don't really know what I'm being charged with here. And am I really not going to be allowed in Britain from now on? And how could someone who is almost religiously for nonviolence be a threat to the public order?
Clearly, a few days have passed since the decision was made. And as you know, as you've discussed with a few other people, there is no official guidance from the government as to their justification for classifying your presence as perhaps not being conducive to the public good. Do you think it is down to your past views on Israel?
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, because they didn't give me any clear reasons why they gave the same public statement that you have there. And it's so vague that nobody knows what it means. But they did give a couple of reasons to the Times, to the reporter that they spoke. And one was about my views on grooming gangs, and they got that completely wrong. So they said that I didn't believe in them. But as Piers Morgan showed when I was on his program, it's on tape. I was on his show earlier, and I said, I definitely believe in them. And I believe they should be punished. So why is the British government lying about me? What a strange thing to do. And then the other one was, well, you have criticized Israel, but in the wrong kind of way. So I'm curious if the British government is ever going to list the acceptable and unacceptable ways of criticizing Israel, and if they have these standards for any other country. So do they have acceptable and unacceptable ways of criticizing Nicaragua? Or a country which is almost exactly the same population as Israel, Papua New Guinea. Is everybody obsessed with figuring out if someone has criticized Papua New Guinea and in an acceptable or an unacceptable way? And if it's unacceptable, does it disturb the public order in the United Kingdom? Obviously, this is Kafkaesque, it's Orwellian. And then the question is, why? Why is your government, and by the way, also my government in America, so obsessed with this tiny little country and whether their feelings have been hurt as they're in the middle of doing a genocide and demanding that we all, British and American citizens, pay for that genocide? How about the feelings of the Palestinians or the Lebanese as they're being invaded by Israel right now, or Iran as they're being attacked by Israel right now? Are we not concerned about their feelings?
It's interesting because I think this kind of gets to the crux of it. I should say as well, you know, genocide is an official term and it's not been formally established by the ICC.
It's a genocide.
But you know, I stand by what I've just said. But can I just? But I think this gets to the crux of this really interesting decision, because you focus there on whether the government here might take similar decisions for other particular countries, but they have made other decisions for other particular issues. As I think you know, a couple of weeks ago, there was a Unite the Kingdom rally, and 11 people were blocked from coming in ahead of that for, one could argue, the sort of opposite type of views, perhaps, that you might have been rightly or wrongly classed as holding yourself, you know, from all sorts of people, Valentina Gomez to Joey Manorino to others as well. And I just bring that up because I think it does show potentially this isn't specifically about Israel. And the very fact that, as you pointed to, you've been here recently in this country, whilst you've held the same sorts of views for quite a long time. Does that make it much more about the UK changing and about free speech, which is a big issue, as opposed to specifically about Israel?
So I understand that it was done to others and for a variety of reasons, but there's two things about that. Number one, of course, is a threshold question of if that's how Britain wants to conduct itself, right? And that is ultimately up to the voters. And so for me, I was born Muslim. I know one of the good people that were banned is Valentina Gomez, and she's a very significant and admitted bigot. So on that one, even so, since I'm an American, I believe in free speech. I wouldn't say, you know, without any restrictions. Of course, there's always some restrictions. But for people who are bigots, I'm not intimidated by them. So she'll make her absurd arguments about Islam, and then I'll make correct arguments about Islam. And so I'm not afraid of any of that debate or the marketplace of ideas. So I wouldn't have banned any of them. But then the second question is, why am I in the bucket with people who are admitted bigots or people who might have called for violence? I'm completely for nonviolence. I'm part of the peace movement, and that applies to every race, religion, and nation. And I believe bigotry is preposterous. So what's going on here? So no one else is put into that category for opposing a nation, and that's what's strange. And we all know it. It's not like if I ask you to guess, hey, which country gets special privileges in America and Britain? I don't think anyone's going to guess, oh, I got it, Bolivia, Malaysia, Guam. No, Guam's part of America. But no, obviously everyone would guess Israel because we all know it's Israel. So I don't know why others were banned, but I know why I was banned, and it was for criticizing.
Yeah. But look, I mean,
the all-powerful Israel.
Well, look, 11. I'm not saying you should be bracketed with other people, and I don't know, to be honest, what all of the 11 people banned a few weeks ago exactly have or haven't done. But you know, there were 11 a few weeks ago. There were 2 this week. So I don't think it's fair to say it's completely that way. And look, who gets special treatment in this country? Our allies do. You know, America gets special treatment. Members of the EU do. You know, Israel is one of our allies, so, you know, it gets treated better than others. But I think it's a leap to suggest it's just Israel, and I think that's highlighted by the 11 bans a few weeks ago and the 2 on this front. I don't think you would say, for example, that the person that made this decision, Shabana Mahmood, is, you know, uniquely pro-Israel.
I don't know her, and if you think she's the only one involved in that decision, I actually know behind the scenes for a fact that that's not true. So there are a lot of people that make these decisions. There's a power structure in every country. And brother, you said, well, you know, we've got a lot of allies and we treat them really well, and that makes sense to treat them better. And you even mentioned America as, of course, one of your top allies. Well, I'm an American. I'm an American citizen. Why am I being treated this way? So that doesn't make any sense at all. So your top ally, you're going to ban their citizens for opposing a different, much smaller ally. I don't even believe that Israel's an ally, but that's a political issue. Look, it's weird to ban people who are against the genocide, but allow people in that are pro-genocide. And then to say furthermore, the people who are anti-genocide are so, you know, such a danger to the public order because they oppose a genocide and they have offended the feelings of the pro-genocide people. That is strange and not exactly moral.
Cenk, thanks so much for joining us. It's a really important debate, and we thank you for joining us so late in the day. We should say again, genocide is an official term. It's not been established yet by the ICC, who will rule on it in due course. And it's such an important debate. We're going to continue it through the programme. On the free speech angle, we'll be joined by Rose Wang. She's the COO of Blue Sky, and will also be joined later in the programme, as we've already mentioned, by Lord Mann, of course, the government's lead independent advisor on anti-Semitism. Those both still to come.
Now, the alleged boss of one of Scotland's largest gangs is due to appear in court in Amsterdam later today. Stephen Lyons is wanted in Spain over his involvement in an alleged international criminal network linked to drug trafficking and money laundering across Europe, the Middle East and Asia. Here's our Scotland correspondent, Connie Glees.
This is Stephen Lyons, a Scottish man authorities across Europe accuse of running a global criminal empire linked to drug trafficking, money laundering and organised crime networks stretching from Glasgow to Spain, Dubai, Turkey and Asia. Spanish investigators claim the Lyons crime clan moved millions through shell companies, cryptocurrency, luxury assets and international drug routes. Sources say they are one of the biggest players in European organised crime. After a 3-year investigation, raids exploded across multiple countries. And then came the arrest. Lyons was stopped at an airport in Bali after landing from Singapore. An Interpol fugitive captured on the other side of the world. He was deported here to the Netherlands under a European arrest warrant issued by Spain. And now Amsterdam becomes the centre of Europe's biggest organised crime cases. Dutch judges are deciding whether Stephen Lyons will be extradited to Spain. And that is why this hearing is happening here. The case is tied to the violent Lyons family feud that's dominated the underworld for more than 20 years. Shootings, executions in Asda car parks in Scotland, international alliances. Last year, Lyons' younger brother, Eddie Lyons Jr., was shot dead in a beachfront bar on the Costa del Sol. Sky News cameras are getting access inside this court as the most wanted man faces the next stage of a case gripping police forces across this continent.
Now, we'll return to our top story. The police watchdog called for people to avoid speculating about the murder of teenager Henry Nowak.
The head of the Independent Office for Police Conduct has warned that discussion of the case could risk prejudicing the investigation. Joining us is the former head of the Equality and Human Rights Commissioner, Baroness Faulkner. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Just to start on this question, do you agree with the police commissioner who told Sky News yesterday that there is no two-tier policing and that policing as a whole is not racist?
I think racism is a problem throughout all of society, so I'll leave that aside just for now. But there's certainly a strong perception that there is two-tier policing, and people have seen real-life examples of that, or examples that seem to indicate that decisions that should have been taken weren't taken because of a fear of being accused of racism or other issues such as Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hostility. And we have examples of those over 20 years, such as the grooming gangs inquiries that were never conducted properly in our northern cities because there was a fear of either racism and or Islamophobia. We know more recently in Birmingham, police and contact with, in advance of the Maccabi football fan scandal, resulted in them not being able to understand where the violence might come from. We know at the current public inquiry going into the Nottingham killings that potential action that may have prevented that wasn't taken because of fear of the statistics of sectioning young black men. So periodically we get examples that lead us to fear that there are problems to do with not just policing, but several public authorities taking differential approaches to something that really involves basic implementation of the law, including equality law.
So just to be clear, what's your own view on it? Do you think there's two-tier policing? And if there is that in breach of the Equality Act?
Well, if organisations develop policies on the basis of something required in the Equality Act, which is called the Public Sector Equality Duty, then that is very clear that it's not about the equality of outcome, it's about the equality of opportunity. And it's a general duty to have regard to fairness, actually. So I would argue that if there is, in examples where there appears to be two-tier policing, that would actually be a breach of the public sector equality duty if, in order to correct for that, people go in the other direction. And I think there is a problem of organizations going in the other direction where they overcorrect by having diversity and inclusion policies that seem to indicate that they're seeking equal outcomes, not necessarily context-specific assessments of what it is that they're trying to avoid.
I mean, some politicians are calling for the scrapping of mandatory diversity training. Is that something you'd support?
Well, it depends on what diversity training there is. I mean, mandatory, I don't believe there's mandatory diversity training in any organizations. Those are policies incorporated by them. The law doesn't call for any kind of training. It is up to organizations to implement the law as it's spelled out. And the problem, I think, is that there's gold plating, if you like, of what the law is, equality law is, and adding to that by organizations to potentially virtual signal to appear to be bending over backwards to accommodate everyone. And equality law always needs to strike a balance. It's a balance. There isn't a hierarchy of rights to say that race is more important than disability or age is more important than sex. All protected characteristics, as they're called, have to be balanced in relation to one another to know what is context-specific and appropriate in a given context.
Clearly there's been lots of comments, whether it's from the head of Hampshire Police, given the IOPC investigation that's still not concluded, or from politicians as a whole, to say, don't speculate, don't politicise this. Do you sense that there is a real legitimate feeling across the country that this has to be deeply discussed and that we're kind of past that point? Whatever people's short-term legitimate wishes are, that we're past that point and this is a critical national issue that deserves the airtime?
Well, I think we need the IOPC investigation to conclude, and we need that to conclude quickly. 3 months is way too long for them to take, for the facts of this particular case to come to light and to know what went wrong there. Clearly something went wrong and we need to know what it was. But in general, sometimes the particular makes us pause, stop and take a deep breath and look more widely. And we should take the opportunity to do that here, because as I've just illustrated, periodically we get cases that feel intuitively deeply unfair. And I think it's profoundly important that the public continues to have confidence in the police and other public authorities. You've also heard about anti-Semitism in the NHS this morning. So public confidence is profoundly important. That's what we expect. That's what everyone expects. And that's at the heart of the fairness angle of our equality laws.
I'm interested to get your take on the latest guidance on single-sex spaces as well, while we have you. Of course, very involved in the implementation of that Supreme Court ruling. The government's finally produced its guidance after I think it was about a year on. Do you welcome it, and why do you think it took so long?
It took over a year, and yes, I welcome it. I was responsible for signing off the guidance, and it's more or less unchanged. There are one or two niggles in it that need correction, and we had a meeting with them yesterday, and we hope to point out to the Equality and Human Rights Commission where they may have slightly misinterpreted the law, the Supreme Court ruling. I welcome it broadly, and I would say this: it follows from the discussion we've just been having that ultimately the law, the Supreme Court clarification of the law, is what organisations need to follow. The EHRC guidance is helpful, and when it completes its work through Parliament, everyone should have a long look at it. But nobody can plead mitigation in a court case if they've discriminated against someone on the basis that they followed the guidance. That mitigation, if they're accused of wrongdoing, has to be on the basis of the law, the Equality Act.
Can I just ask, what were the niggles? What are the niggles that you say need correcting?
Well, I think one of the rather confusing sections of it was not done when I was chair, was the description of the category of sex, the protected characteristic of sex, being special category data. Special category data is regulated by the Office for the Information Commissioner, and it means treating certain data in a certain way. If you treat whether people are men or women, boys or girls, as special category data, then you restrict the ability of researchers, of data gatherers, all organizations have to gather data on, particularly the NHS and places like that, on what was the sex of the person, because it's intrinsic to an evaluation of what's going on. You could take gender pay gap reporting as well. So data should be, what it does, it puts, I think I would say, it puts a collar around organizations' abilities to properly gather that data. And what they should be doing is basically issuing a correction. It's only draft guidance at the moment. It's in Parliament. It's there for roughly 40 days, roughly 6 weeks. And they should issue a correction straight away to explain what they mean. And I think what they mean is it has to be handled in a certain way if there was gender reassignment involved. It should be handled in a certain way rather than asking people, what is your sex, to be forbidden. That's not what, you can ask people, what is your sex? Of course you can. If you don't ask that question, you won't be able to do the rest of your obligations under maintaining single-sex spaces. So I think they should issue a correction while it's in draft.
Baroness Faulkner, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We end the hour with football, and the World Cup, of course, is seriously close now, and we'll be talking about it now with the former Sky Sports legend and now TalkSport legend, Jim White, who joins us in studio. Jim.
What an introduction.
And
we're excited.
I was thinking, have you ever
Thank you very much.
This Sky studio? No.
I was here once for whatever reason. I think, Wolf, I was interviewed by Adam Bolton about transfer deadline day.
Oh, wow.
And as you might imagine, Sophie, it was an interview that Adam wanted over fairly quickly, as it wasn't exactly his specialised subject. But yes, once, so it's with great joy and anticipation I join Frost and Ridge and Frost, sorry.
Correct.
Let me get it right.
Get it right.
Let me get it right. I'm not so sure about these precarious high seats. I might come off this in a hurry, but
they're
we'll
elevated because I'm abnormally large, so thank you.
To try and balance out the height difference.
So, Jim, you're setting off to the US this weekend ahead of what's going to be epic World Cup coverage. Yeah. And let's start, I mean, obviously, mainly going as a broadcaster, but also as a Scotland fan.
Oh, very much so.
Incredibly excited for this.
Very, very much so, Wilfred. I mean, I am now incredibly old, Sophie. I mean, I was at Mexico 86, I was at France 98, and I was in Qatar. So this will be my fourth. But as you know, Will, for the first time since France 98, Scotland have qualified for the finals. So it's very exciting. I was slightly taken aback when I saw one of our group opponents, Haiti, win the other night against New Zealand. So, and won 4-0, as you probably saw. So I'm thinking, that could be tricky. And Simon Jordan on TalkSport continually reminds me that will be tricky. It could be a potential banana skin. I hope not. But it's great. Scotland in with Haiti, Morocco and Brazil, who we always seem to get. Blinking Brazil.
It's quite a hard group, isn't it, to be honest?
It is a tough group, but you've got to be in it to win it, Sophie. That's my approach. As for England, I mean, are you confident about England? What do you think?
I'm hopeful.
We're split.
I'm a glass half full. I think we can do it.
I'm a pessimist.
I'm not saying I expect it, but I think we've got...
When you think you can do it, you think you can win it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's my reaction too.
The reason being, Jim, we had a very young squad under Gareth.
Yeah.
They've matured, but our older players, like Harry Kane, haven't gone worse. In fact, he's peaking, I'd say.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he's the player. He could end up being the player of the tournament.
That would be a great outcome.
But and I noticed the other night your first opponents, Croatia, lost to Belgium. So maybe they are misfiring a bit. But I mean, that's what these warm-up games are all about, isn't it?
So what do you expect the mood to be? Because on one level, it could transform America to love football even more. On another level, are the real fans going to get into the games with the prices?
Well, that's such a good question. I mean, the prices, and I knew we were going to talk about this, Wolf, when you look at it, I mean, as you will be aware, dynamic pricing for the first time is going to be used at a World Cup, and the cost of tickets have fluctuated wildly, and they're still fluctuating. I mean, right now, Category 3 seats, the cheapest available, range from $140 US to $1,400 US dollars, and that's just the group stages. But Sophie, it gets worse. A Category 1 ticket for the final cost almost $11,000 US when FIFA released its latest batch in April. Earlier this month, a front row seat for the final was sold by FIFA for almost $33,000 US.
And that's from FIFA, that's not resale.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. FIFA has its own resale platform, and that platform has no cap as to what users want to resell tickets for, Wolf. So, I mean, it's crazy.
I feel like it's particularly difficult for us here in the UK because here, football is such a community sport.
Exactly.
You know, it's not just who can pay the most, and it's something that is embedded in communities across the UK.
Yeah.
And about real fans, isn't it? It's difficult to
Well,
accept
precisely.
it.
Yeah. I mean, many people have said, well, it's America, it's in America. Well, it is, and we have to go on with it. But as you know, I mean, you've been out there and lived out there, Wilfred. You know, at the end of the day, how interested, how consumed will Americans be by this tournament? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
I'm a believer it's going to be a great tournament. And Jim, we've got 5 seconds left. I bet you dinner that England go beyond Scotland.
You are...
That's such an unfair bet, but you know what? I take it. I see your bet and I take it. Come on, Scotland.
We'll be right back.
Great to be with you.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us.
The police watchdog urges people not to speculate about Henry Nowak's murder as Hampshire's chief constable rejects suggestions of two-tier policing.
Israel and Lebanon agreed to a ceasefire deal which the US says is contingent on Hezbollah stopping attacks.
A lifeline for hundreds of women with ovarian cancer as a new treatment is approved for NHS use.
Now, the world of social media is changing at breakneck speed. We'll talk to the Chief Operating Officer of Blue Sky.
And the alleged boss of one of Scotland's biggest organised crime gangs faces trial in Amsterdam after being arrested in Bali.
Hello, thank you for being with us today. Now, the UK's police watchdog has urged people not to speculate about the murder of Henry Nowak. The head of the Independent Office for Police Conduct says it could prejudice the investigation and risk Henry's family not getting the answers they deserve.
Well, this heartbreaking image is 18-year-old Henry in handcuffs after being fatally stabbed by his attacker, who had falsely accused him of racist abuse.
We're going to be examining the impact of his murder on community division in the programme throughout the morning. At the centre of this tragedy is a grieving family who have called for Henry's death not to be used to create further tension or hatred. And that was reflected in fiery exchanges in the Commons yesterday, the Prime Minister accusing Reform UK leader Nigel Farage of exploiting Henry's death.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and ask for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable.
Well, Chief Constable of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary has rejected claims of two-tier policing.
Part of what the IOPC will look at is what was in our minds at that time, what impacted the decisions we made. You know, that's got to run its course. What I would say, and I think where you're going there is, you know, do we have a two-tier type policing system? I would refute that. I would say absolutely not. I see officers day in, day out on the grounds serving without fear or favour all our communities. And I think that's the case nationally. I appreciate other people have a different view, but that's my view. So be really clear, I do not think policing is racist. There are racist individuals within policing, of course there are, and there have always been, and we will tackle that and deal with it. But it is not any anti-community.
So that was the Hampshire Police Chief. We put the same question to Lucy Rigby, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. This is her answer.
Thousands of police officers that go out to work every day, putting themselves in harm's way to serve the public, to try and prevent crime and to keep us all safe. So I think that the suggestion, in light of that we have two-tier policing, which suggests at its heart that the police are, on a sort of systemic basis, putting the interests of one group above another, I genuinely think is a slur on all those police officers that are serving this country day and night, 7 days a week.
Government there. Also worth, referring people back. We'll be posting it on YouTube to our conversation with Baroness Faulkner on the topic as well, and we'll be talking to Alex Chalk coming up as well.
In the meantime, Keir Starmer's close cabinet ally Darren Jones told Peter Mandelson he was so sorry to see him sacked as US ambassador in WhatsApp messages not released as part of the humble address but leaked to The Spectator.
The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister had previously said he no longer had access to messages he sent to Mandelson. Ali has joined us with a bit more detail on this. Ali, what are most controversial messages that have come out?
Well, look, there's all sorts of messages, and this, obviously, I should say, is in The Spectator, but there's one that really does stand out. This was when Peter Mandelson was sacked because we knew about the closeness of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and on that day, a message was sent by Darren Jones, this is in The Spectator, saying, "You've been doing such a great job and you worked wonders with Trump. I'm so sorry about today." I think it's worth, noting that at that time, we obviously knew that there was a close relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, enough for him to be sacked. We didn't yet know, the most recent information we've had, that he passed sensitive information, Peter Mandelson, on the government to Jeffrey Epstein. So I should remind people we didn't know that. But still, that is significant. I've been reaching out to Darren Jones's team. He did apologise last night. Let's have a listen to that.
Did I, at best, subconsciously treat Peter Mandelson differently because I believed him to have influence and power within the Labour Party? And I think the answer to that question is yes, I did. Have I benefited from that relationship in the time I've been an elected politician? I think in part the answer to that question is yes, I did. And for that I'd like to apologise to the House, to the victims, to Lisa, and commit to then doing something about it.
So, look, that's the apology there from Darren Jones, but look, I guess it puts Labour ministers in a difficult position, particularly, Labour women. I was really struck talking to Lucy Rigby, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, in one of his old jobs, by the way, about how difficult it was for her to talk about this issue, right?
Yeah, I thought, it wasn't even Lucy Rigby's words, it was the way that she answered you, didn't you think? She just seemed really weary. In fact, let's have a listen, I think we've got it.
You asked me how I feel about that, not great, is the honest answer. My totally honest view, Sophie, is that this isn't a Westminster problem. This is frankly, what the Jeffrey Epstein saga reveals about gender dynamics right around the world, actually, but in particular involving some of the most powerful people in the world, in some cases allegedly. That makes me pretty angry.
Pretty angry, yeah. You could see, I think, very clearly that she did feel angry. She said it's not just a Westminster problem. There's loads of other messages that they reveal, embarrassing bits, him effectively criticising Johnny Reynolds or his advisors, saying that it doesn't fill you with confidence that Jonathan Reynolds and Rachel Reeves are in charge of growth plans. Also talking about his getting thoughts and advice off Peter Mandelson on a reshuffle. There's so much here. I think it's about what we didn't get from those Mandelson files, a second tranche. We know the Prime Minister has disappearing messages too. There's been lots of questions about that. My understanding is that these messages were on an old phone that Darren Jones had, and that is why they weren't released and they've come out in this way. And yeah, look, embarrassing messages, but I think the most difficult one is this one on the day that he resigned.
Ali, thank you very much.
Now, the US State Department has announced that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to renew their ceasefire. A truce was meant to be in place in April, but hostilities have continued.
So it was a joint statement from Israel and the US saying the new deal is contingent on an end to fighting between Hezbollah and the Israeli military. It was brokered in talks with Washington, but look, I guess the crucial thing is that Hezbollah hasn't agreed to the terms and wasn't involved in negotiations.
Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons has the latest from Jerusalem.
It's significant that this ceasefire has been renewed, but it raises so many questions. When you have a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah is not involved in the negotiation of that, well, you don't have to be United Nations to work out that that's a fairly fundamental flaw. And Hezbollah has been pretty antagonistic towards these talks. So I think they are, the word fragile has been used for these ceasefires again and again, and this one definitely looks fragile. It's dependent, of course, upon the extent to which Iran, which funds and trains Hezbollah, is going to enforce it. But it's also vague, frankly, in actually what it says is going to happen on the ground. It talks about pilot areas where the Lebanese military will be in control. We don't know where they are. We don't really know what that control looks like. And we don't know how those would be arranged in southern Lebanon. There's no talk in this about a concrete timetable for Israel withdrawing from Lebanon. The Lebanese Health Ministry says that 3,500 people have been killed by Israel during this latest round of fighting, and that around 1 million people have been displaced. And of course, Israel is occupying a vast amount of land in Lebanon. And the ceasefire, as it is at the moment, has not stopped Israel killing people as recently as yesterday, and it hasn't stopped Hezbollah firing rockets towards northern Israel or drones towards Israeli soldiers. So, look, there's always that cliche that war is better than war. But there are so many questions that are unanswered that this, at the moment, feels like a triumph of optimism, but it does feel as if it is going to be fragile.
Adam Parsons there for us in Jerusalem.
Now, NHS staff could be banned from wearing political badges on their uniforms, for instance, pro-Palestinian symbols, as part of proposals to try and help tackle anti-Semitism in the health service.
It's one of several recommendations in a review by the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann. He says the current system needs a major overhaul, and Jewish patients and staff face routine ostracism in the service.
So just to run you through what the recommendations are. Firstly, the government says it wants mandatory anti-Semitism training for NHS leaders within 6 months. It also wants clear national guidance on how staff should respond to racist behaviour from members of the public. And it will be publishing a set of staff standards to try and hold trusts to account, to set minimum expectations for how organisations must prevent, respond to and learn from racist incidents.
We'll be hearing from Lord Mann a little later in the programme, 9:40. Lots, of course, to discuss with him. Staying with the issue of anti-Semitism, the recent rise in violence towards members of the UK's Jewish communities, our communities correspondent Lisa Holland was given rare access to Shomrim, a volunteer patrol group in North London, who've been stepping in to try and diffuse tense situations in their neighbourhood. Well, here's her report.
Any more units available to back up 2-2 and 4-4? It's getting a bit heated over there.
With anti-Semitism surging, we're scrambling to a call for help.
A lady, she's been blocked in and victim of anti-Semitic abuse, and she's extremely anxious.
These men are not police officers, but North West London volunteers with the Jewish community support group Shomrim, the Hebrew word for guards. We arrived to find two versions of events. The husband of the Jewish woman has dashed to the scene, afraid for the safety of his wife and young child. He wouldn't speak on camera, scared of what he called an anti-Semitic mob, but told us his wife was taunted about a recent arson attack on Jewish ambulances. Two men and a woman say they weren't blocking her in, but had broken down. They denied making anti-Semitic comments, but seemed annoyed by one of the Jewish men who allegedly referred to Shomrim as our police, though this is disputed. It's a tense atmosphere, which ultimately is diffused, and the Jewish woman manages to drive off.
The reason why she called was because he said, you Jews think that you could do whatever you want, and that's why your ambulances were burnt down. I just want to see if the car's still stuck.
So we're just going back actually to see whether the broken down car has now moved or not. It's about 6 minutes since we pulled away. Let's see.
Magic. The car's gone to the side. Now, who's saying the truth? That may be quite telling.
Just to kind of spell it out, what you're saying is because the car is gone 6 minutes later, that you say that that vehicle was being deliberately parked there to block that woman in and intimidate her.
100%, and with vile anti-Semitic comments.
Volunteer Ben Grosnas is a luxury furniture salesman. Avi Ball works in online sales, but was one of the first on the scene at a double stabbing a few months ago. As we drive round Golders Green, it's clear how nervous people are. Just a few hours before we went on patrol with Shom Rim, a major fire saw them inundated with calls.
Literally just people worried, obviously speculating if it is or isn't terror-related. And the anxiety, do I send my children to school today? What advice can you give us? And it turns out afterwards, the preliminary is that it's an electrical fault. But the stress... They've just been called us over.
We've been flagged down. Tempers are flaring at the side of the road.
There's nothing wrong in public recording.
A Jewish man has been accused of taking pictures of a Muslim cleric, which he denies.
Do you think that some people who aren't Jewish feel a little bit intimidated by the Shom Rim?
Absolutely not. We, across board, are called by anyone. You don't have to be Jewish to call us.
Perhaps some members of the Muslim community might feel a bit awkward when you show up. I mean, how do you think that might...
We just spoke to that imam over there, and he was very happy to speak to us and very happy that we diffused the situation.
All this in just over an hour in one part of London. Volunteers doing their bit to try to keep a lid on simmering community tensions and record levels of anti-Semitism. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Golders Green.
As we said, we'll be talking to Lord Mann at 9:40, so stay tuned for that. Right, let's return to our top story. The police watchdog has called for people to avoid speculating about the events surrounding the last moments of Henry Nowak's life in order to not prejudice their ongoing internal police investigation.
Now, we're joined by the former Lord Chancellor, former Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk KC, who's a barrister at Jones Day. It's great to have you on this. Obviously, normally when you come on, we talk to you about the politics, but actually I'm really interested in your work as a criminal barrister, right? You know, in some of these very, very high-profile cases. Do you think there is two-tier policing?
Look, I in my practice as a barrister, and I prosecuted the Eliane Andam case, which gave rise to the appalling adolescence drama that some people have seen. I haven't personally experienced it, candidly. But what I saw with the Nowak case, of course, raises cause for concern, because very often, when police arrive at the scene, in my experience, they'll say, right, who is the most injured person? Assume that that person is likely to be the victim. Who is the person who's still on their toes? That person is likely to be the suspect, and that will be the presumption. What was odd about this case, it was flipped. So the person who was obviously most gravely injured, who was on the ground and incapacitated, the police moved to consider that that person was likely to be the suspect. So that was curious. Now, if there was simply a mistake and confusion at the scene, I've got to tell you, it will not be the first time I've witnessed mistake and confusion at the scene. So it is right that the IOPC take its course, etc., and that happens in a sober, calm way. But this was very, very unusual, very surprising. And look, it is troubling. So there's a case to answer there, and it's got to be answered calmly but fully.
Do you think when you factor in some of the guidance that has been focused on, that the pendulum has swung too far? Or is that, again, an unfair thing to bring up for all of the good work that's been done in this area over decades?
Yeah, so look, good work has been done, and we in government did some important stuff, the race disparity audit, which did things like saying, well, hang on, if you've got white defendants and you've got black defendants and Asian defendants, what are the outcomes? Race disparity audit. And we had a mantra which said, explain or change. In other words, if there's a reason for the discrepancy, then you're going to have, then that's OK. But if there is no good reason for it, you're going to have to change. Now, the thing that has potentially gone wrong is the analysis trap, which assumes that all disparity automatically means discrimination. Now, that isn't necessarily the case. I mean, the fact is, as Justice Secretary, I saw, and by the way, I'm not disparaging any particular national group, but there are a disproportionate number of Albanians in our prisons, much the highest number in our jails, as a matter of fact. I don't believe the system is institutionally anti-Albanian. The number of men in prison compared to women, it's 95% men, 5% women. I don't think the system is institutionally anti-men. I think, afraid, men commit more crime. And so what we have got to do as a nation is not fall into the analysis trap, out of an abundance of wanting to do the right thing, by the way, which is to have a fair system, to end up drawing false conclusions. And I think there may be an element of that in what we're seeing at the moment. So I think we do need to potentially have a recalibration, this business of confusion between equity and equality. That's my particular concern.
Do you think there's a particular issue with the police?
Look, overwhelmingly, I find with the police is that if they are given clear direction, and the most obvious example of this was the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984. I mean, this is the biblical tome which police must follow, and it says stuff like, this is how long you can keep a person in custody, this is when you must give them breaks, this is how you read them their rights, etc. If you provide clear guidance, by and large, police officers will follow it, and they'll want to follow it and do their duty. The concern here is that I think the police have been given muddled and unclear guidance. And by and large, they want to do the right thing, but they're sometimes confused about what the right thing is. And I think we should just be super clear, very bright lines. Be fair, treat everyone equally. Don't see it as your job to try to reverse engineer societal problems or on the front line be trying to compensate for things that may have happened a long time ago in different countries. I travel around the world a lot, and let me tell you, I think this is the most fair-minded country anywhere in the world, by and large. Let's make sure, though, it's about equality before the law. That must be the touchstone.
Clear guidance, clearly, totally can see how that's necessary and would make things easier. Is there an added problem, and maybe this is something that's across other areas of government, and it makes it easier to answer the question rather than police, but you know this from all of your roles, where there's too much fear of after the fact being brought down in your career or something worse, because there are so many sort of extra rules and guidance and HR policies and the like, that no one can judge the situation on the scene live in their very well-trained, experienced role as a police officer, because you're surrounded by 17 courses you had to take in the last month.
Look, it's a great point. I think too many police officers think, hang on a second, this is a total minefield. I'm stepping into a minefield here. So 2012, I prosecuted, before it was all on the news, a grooming gang, a gang of guys from Birmingham who took 2 young white girls from Telford, and unspeakable things happened. There is no doubt at that time, for the officers investigating that, they were treading on eggshells. Now, they shouldn't be thinking along those lines. They should be treating everyone equally. Here's a group of guys who abducted 2 underage girls and did appalling things. The concern is if they're looking over their shoulder. Look, what I would want to be saying to police officers, treat everyone equally, be fair, don't overthink it. And they are overthinking it, and I don't think they've been well treated, I may say, by a load of guidance which is well-meaning but is wrong-headed.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yeah.
There was unfathomable mistake made on the day with Henry Nowak.
Yeah.
Awful for him, beyond awful, and the family. Was it not necessarily the police officer's fault if he did overthink it in the moment?
No, precisely. So, first of all, we've got to work out precisely what was going through that officer's head, and apparently he's resigned, but he's clearly going to have to explain what happened. Now, if he thought, and can credibly be found to have been thinking, I was second-guessing this because of the guidance, then that's a big issue, right? And I absolutely think that should feed into reconsidering the guidance. It may be, however, that those considering his evidence say, actually, he got confused. Bear in mind, we've only seen part of what took place. There will be other witnesses, etc. They've got to give... So, Act 1, Scene 1, what happened? Act 1, Scene 2, what was going through his head. Once you've made findings about that, then you work out what the solution is. But what you've got to make sure is you don't get to Act 1, Scene 3 before you've taken it in stages. So that's what's got to happen.
Can I ask you a bit about knife crime? Because you successfully prosecuted on the Eliane Andam case, which, I'll be honest, was one of the most horrific killings that I can remember in recent years. This girl, young girl, on the bus, and the guy in the Nowak case was obviously carrying an 8-inch, I think it's right in saying, blade. What lessons do we need to learn on knife crime, thinking about the case that you prosecuted?
Yes, I mean, the thing that was... You're right, it was profoundly shocking. I've done endless murders and terrorisms, but this was uniquely horrifying. You saw a 15-year-old girl with a huge smile on her face post something to TikTok. Within 20 seconds, she'd been stabbed in the neck. I mean, it was unimaginable, and all caught on bus CCTV. So the thing that was so striking about that is the young man who did it, 17 years old, the knife was a knife that he'd taken from his mum's kitchen block. The thing that's striking about the Nowak case as well, is this was a lawful ceremonial weapon as well. There is a huge amount of knives that aren't flick knives and lock knives. These are everyday things. And people reach for them, literally and metaphorically, from the home or indeed from their religious items. And so I think it's a readiness to reach for weapons and to use them in the street, in the town centre. So in the case, the Eliane Andam, this guy in Croydon, got this, wore two sets of trousers so that he could conceal it in his trousers without cutting himself as he got on a bus to go into central Croydon. And it's the willingness and readiness and the unremarkability of that is so shocking.
Yeah, anyone can get a kitchen knife.
Anyone can get a kitchen knife. And it's the readiness to do it. Say, well, I know, I've got beef with someone, I want to settle some scores, what am I going to do? I know, I'll reach for a weapon. That's what's shocking.
Can I just ask one extra question as someone who cares so much about the law, the process, doing it right, but also has been a politician? Because there's a balance. Now that the main court case is over and that the murderer has been convicted, but the IOPC investigation is still pending, where do you stand on whether it's OK or right for politicians to be talking about this? It's become a national conversation. Should politicians stay silent? Have they gone too far?
No, they shouldn't. So, look, of course they've got to speak. This is a matter of national confidence, public confidence, absolutely yes. And if you have a vacuum, then that can be filled by people who are unscrupulous. So, yes, but I think the way to deal with it is say, this case presents real initial concerns about how the guidance is operating. I have had misgivings about it. If I was Secretary of State, I'd be saying that. And I say, I think that there are real cause for concern, etc. But let's take it in stages to find out what happened at the scene so we don't learn the wrong lessons. Lawyers, the first thing you learn at bar school, hard cases make bad law. In other words, you could have a very unique set of circumstances, you then respond to that and create a whole load more difficulties. That's why you have to take a breath. That's not the same as saying we're going to be buttoned up and tight-lipped and not say a thing about it, but you can do it in the right way. And it's not beyond the wit of intelligent politicians and responsible politicians to do things in the right way. And some of the stuff that we've seen should have been said differently or not at all.
It's been really interesting to get your perspective, as always, on these things. So thank you very much for coming on the programme. Alex Chalk at KC talking to us there.
Now, hundreds of women with advanced ovarian cancer are being offered a lifeline today with a new life-extending therapy approved for use.
It's the first new treatment for the disease to be added to the NHS in more than 20 years. Our correspondent Phoebe Southworth is here with more. If you're wondering what that noise
Everyone's all right.
We're OK, don't worry. We had a little breakage over here.
Should also just be fair to Alex Chalk that it wasn't Alex's fault as well, because everyone will assume.
But he's OK. He's also OK as he's
Everyone's
in the studio.
OK. It wasn't.
We're all fine.
He's very coordinated as well as being seriously across all the legal rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he's not coordinated, but he didn't just prove it there.
So, Phoebe, talk to us about this ovarian cancer drug.
Well, ovarian cancer does affect about 7,500 women in the UK every year, and this new drug is hopefully going to improve the lives of about 400 of those women who have an advanced case of the condition. And that's not that uncommon, actually, because it's often picked up late, symptoms are quite hard to detect, and chemotherapy is what has been relied upon for basically the last 20 years. To treat women in this very precarious situation, very stressful. But of course, chemotherapy has very bad side effects. Well, this new drug is going to be for people who have certain types of ovarian, fallopian tube and peritoneal cancers which are resistant to chemotherapy. It's not a scattergun kind of treatment, which chemotherapy can sometimes be criticised as being. It can also target healthy cells. This is a targeted therapy. It latches onto those cancer cells and it kills them. It's a Trojan horse mechanism. And well, clinical trials have shown that women can have their life extended by an average of about 4 months. And this is what the CEO of Overcomb, a charity for ovarian cancer, told us about the drug.
This treatment gives hope and quality of life and length of life to people at point of platinum resistance. So when the treatments that are available previously were just not working. But also it means that because this is the first ever treatment for platinum resistant ovarian cancer, it actually gives hope to the whole community.
Well, it's so, as you say, just so important and great to be having this new drug available. Phoebe, thank you very much indeed.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the Russia-Ukraine war with a Ukrainian MP. Don't go anywhere.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back, and it's just 2 weeks until voters head to the polls in the Makerfield by-election, which, of course, putting it the understatement, it could have wider implications for UK politics. Once a Labour stronghold, the area saw Reform UK sweep the board during the local elections, and our political editor, Beth Rigby, has been to meet the candidates to see what they're offering.
Nestled between Liverpool and Manchester, the Makerfield constituency is a patchwork of small towns and villages that were once the heartlands of Wigan's mining industry and the Labour Party. For more than a century, this part of Lancashire has sent Labour MPs to Westminster. Now it could determine the party's and the country's future. Voters in this seat have been asked to elect a Labour MP to get rid of a Labour PM. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham was MP for neighbouring Lee. Now, after persuading Makerfield's sitting Labour MP Josh Simons to step aside, Burnham's opening the door to a return to Westminster in a bid to enter number 10. What are you offering the people of Makerfield?
An end to 40 years of neoliberalism, is the way I've put it. In other words, a country, services that work for you, not for the private vested interest.
Why is this by-election so consequential? What are the consequences of it?
It's a chance to create a circuit breaker, to say, no, we need something completely different to what we've had. And I've created
the circuit breaker.
Well, I've created something different in Greater Manchester. I left Westminster 10 years ago to build a new politics, and that's what we've done.
Okay.
I've taken a place-first approach, not a party-first approach, focused on problem-solving, not point-scoring.
Andy, I'm just going to say then the silent bit out loud, because this isn't just a by-election, is it? This is the start of a leadership campaign, isn't it? Let's just cut to the chase here.
I have been true all the way through my political career, fighting for people here in this part of the North West who have had a raw deal off the powers that be in Westminster.
But Labour's facing fierce challenge from Reform UK. In May's local elections, Reform swept the board here, winning all 8 council wards up for grabs in Makerfield. This once safe Labour seat is now one of its most vulnerable in the North West.
The proper local, plucky plumber, who's taking on the so-called King of the North.
But Reform's candidate here, Robert Kenyon, has faced scrutiny over a series of past social media posts, including one in which he wrote, "I'm sexist, sorry, but I am. Women can't ref, drive or give directions." Why should women in Makerfield vote for you, Rob?
If you speak to the press office.
Why should women in Makerfield vote for you, Rob, when you said you're a sexist?
Can you not...
No, but why should women vote for you?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
When you said that you were a sexist and that they can't drive? As you can see there, Reform's candidate doesn't want to talk to us. We have asked the party for an interview and they didn't want to do one, but they have given us this statement. It reads, "This is a 2-horse race between Reform and Labour. Makerfield does not need yet another Labour politician in Parliament who simply wants to use local people as a stepping stone. Reform says that this is a constituency that deserves a strong local working class voice. They say that's exactly why Rob will make an excellent MP for Makerfield."
People say that we're racist or whatever,
But Reform UK isn't the only insurgent party on the right who could decide Labour's fate in this by-election. Restore Britain, the party founded by former Reform MP Rupert Lowe and backed by the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, is threatening to eat into Reform's share of the vote. And it could hand this seat to Andy Burnham. Their candidate, local businesswoman Rebecca Shepherd, is campaigning to tackle what Restore call gangs of foreign men who harass and intimidate local women and girls in Ashton and across the Wigan borough. Restore Britain did not respond to our interview request. Vote splitting is not just a concern on the right, as progressive parties too jostle for votes in Makerfield. But Lib Dem candidate Jake Austin argues voters deserve an alternative to Labour and Reform.
To me, that feels like the residents of Makerfield are being used as a pawn in the psychodrama of the Labour leadership election. And I think residents deserve a Liberal candidate who is going to focus on the things that matter to them. Things like fixing the NHS, cutting the cost of living, revitalising our high streets, the things that they actually care about when I talk to them on the doors.
If Reform were to win the seat here, is there any concern from you that by standing here in a seat that the Lib Dems aren't realistically going to win, you actually end up splitting the centre-left vote and handing the seat to Reform?
I believe in a voting system that actually represents how people vote. I would like people to be able to vote for what they believe in rather than what they see as a necessary evil or the least worst out of two options.
Sarah Wakefield, a Manchester councillor running for the Green Party, says voters deserve a say on policy.
I mean, the Green Party are here to offer a message of hope, of unity, and the idea that things can be really different. Not only will I make sure that I'm a really listening MP, that I'm someone there on the ground, finding out what the main problems for people are, but we are also advocating on a national level for things that will really make a difference to people's lives, to a wealth tax so that those that can most afford it will fund our public services, to regenerating our high streets and protecting our green belt.
Meanwhile, the Conservatives, now a sideshow here, aren't giving up.
My main points of the campaign are I want to regenerate the high street. We've got two main centres of population in terms of the high street. We've got Ashton where we are today, and we've also got Hindley as well. And I want us to really regenerate our high streets and make sure that we've got decent independent shops and bigger shops as well that can trade and thrive, and that people come back to those high streets and really sort of like make it a community again as well. So that's my number one sort of like campaign pledge. And we're also campaigning on antisocial behaviour and crime as well, because it is a concern for local people.
I guess the thing is, when you were not in government, in the past you were the main opposition and the opposition on the right. And now what you're finding here is that there's two insurgent parties on the right, and you are not even the main opposition anymore. I mean, it must be tougher.
It's always been tough, because when I first started in 1997, we were like nearly 20,000 behind as well. So it's always been tough being a Conservative in Makerfield. But that's what I like about it. I like a challenge, and I'm going for it. I've opposed the Labour Party all my adult political life, and I'm not going to give up now.
Makerfield is more than a by-election. It's a political watershed for Labour and the country. For Labour, it's a test of whether one of its most popular politicians can win back its working-class communities and hold off Farage's turquoise wave. For the country, it could determine who will be our next Prime Minister. A moment of history about to be made in Makerfield that will have consequences not just for people here, but for all of us. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Wigan.
Well, on the issue, of course, of the Makerfield by-election, there are 14 candidates in all. You can see them all on your screen now. It's page 1 for you. And page 2, the vote on the 18th of June.
Now, in the last few days, there have been multiple strikes hitting Russia and also, of course, Ukraine. Long-range Ukrainian drones struck an oil terminal in St. Petersburg, as well as a bus being targeted in the Russian-controlled Donetsk region.
We're joined now by the Ukrainian MP, Alexei Goncharenko. Thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for inviting.
First of all, sum up for us the scale of damage done, the scale of attacks that Ukrainian cities have received in this last week.
Unfortunately, we saw a new wave of escalation from Russia, especially against Kiev, the capital, when Russia launched probably one of the biggest during the whole war attacks. If to take ballistic missiles, it was probably their biggest, with multiple victims. And it was really devastating. And Russia continues to threaten even international diplomats, urging them to leave Kiev, that they're going to continue these awful strikes. So, yeah, that's what's happening.
The resilience of the Ukrainian people is amazing. Many of us will know Ukrainians living in the UK now, but for the people in Ukraine, having this bombardment, what is life like?
I mean, it's bad. It's exhausting, and it's 12 years of the war and more than 4 years of full-scale invasion, and it's super difficult, I want to be frank with you. But thank you for saying about our resilience. It's not because we are some superhumans, but it's because we don't have any other option. We all know that Russia commits genocide against Ukrainians on occupied territories. So if they will crush Ukraine, they will kill people like me, they will take our children, and then they will attack you. That's how this empire works. That's like boys which were unborn in 2000 in Chechnya now are fighting against Ukraine. Boys in 2008, when they took part of Georgia, now these boys are fighting against us. The same in Crimea, the same in Donbass. So they need people to continue expansion and attacks. That's how they see the world, and we need to stop this.
I mean, I do think you are superhuman, relative to the rest of us at least, who don't have to show the resilience that you're showing. And the reason I bring that up is to ask the genuine view, because President Zelensky obviously has to balance things, he has to be diplomatic, but the genuine view of Ukrainians when you saw a few weeks ago the decision by the UK to relax some sanctions. How does that make you feel?
Very badly, I would be frank with you, because United Kingdom from the very beginning was one of our biggest supporters, and United Kingdom did an amazing job. And to see, for us, it's a kind of a sign that even our closest ally is beginning to waver, and this is very, very big problem. I think it was a big moral and strategic mistake from UK government. Big moral, it's clear why, but strategic too, because it encourages aggressor. That's exactly opposite way from how we should do in order to stop this war. Because this war continues only because of one thing, because of Russian oil revenues. If Russia would not have these revenues, their war chest would be empty, the war will be finished. Because Ukraine, we are not demanding even Russia, we are not even demanding today that Russia to leave occupied territories. We are ready to stop on the current lines. And the only reason why the war continues is because Russia still hopes that sooner or later our support will crack, so our partners will waver. And unfortunately, that was exactly which was shown by UK government. And we are very concerned about this decision, and we think it should be reconsidered. Definitely, I understand all the problems and the price for fuel and everything, but at the same time, what will be the price if Russia will continue to advance? What will be the price if British soldiers in Baltic states will need to fight against Russians and die? So the price is much higher than 10% in kerosene price, I think it's much more at stake.
Are we naive in the UK? Do we think we'll always be at peace?
Yeah, and we were naive too 12 years ago, so it's normal. We thought after the Second World War, we thought that this craziness is over, that it is another world, people are clever and can deal with their different issues. Unfortunately, the war is here, and you see that if you will take year by year, it's more and more war. First Ukraine, then Middle East, then other. So we constantly in the chaotic and hectic world. And in this world, there is only one thing to stop such aggressors, is to punish them for what they did, is to be strong, is to support one another. There is no other way. In other way, we will be completely in chaos.
Alexei, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting. Thank you.
Alexei Gencharenko with us here.
Some very powerful words there as well. Thank you.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about free speech. We'll be talking to the Chief Operating Officer of Blue Sky. That's next.
Hello, it's 7 o'clock. This is the Kathy Newman Show. How long's the 5 million going to last, Mr. Farage? Let's find out. Diane, who would you put in there?
It's not for me to say. I want to see.
Not
You've just
yourself,
accused
not
them.
you. Do you ever look at yourself and think, are you the problem?
I do feel sorry for him, yeah.
We'll see what happens. Does it mean, frankly, that you are an irrelevant? Great to have this lovely couple on the sofa.
I know, what a dream team they are.
She's christened the couch.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else? Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. Sorry, I didn't realise we were back live. My apologies, no one was speaking to me. But anyway, as concerns grow over algorithms, misinformation and the influence of a handful of powerful tech platforms, some networks are promising users more control over what they see and how they interact online. I'm delighted to say we're welcoming back Rose Wang, Chief Operating Officer at social media platform Blue Sky here, who was with us briefly earlier in the week and we got taken over by live news. So thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
So just for those that don't know, tell us where Blue Sky's got and why you launched it in the first place. As a sort of, most people see as an alternative to X, to Twitter?
It's a great question. So most people know Blue Sky as an app that's a hybrid between a Reddit and a Twitter. And we've grown to about 44 million users after just about 2 years of being publicly open. But Blue Sky exists to fix the problems that the first wave of social has brought to the world. We live in a world now where about 3 to 5 corporations control speech. They manufacture attention, which leads to addiction. And this is a huge problem. It's very dangerous. Blue Sky is all about giving control and power back to users so that the land and the spaces that they use online belong to them and not to corporations.
So do you have any algorithms at all operating behind the scenes that kind of do push or hold back some content to some users or not?
I would think about it as there's over 100,000 feeds on Blue Sky, but of those feeds, only a few of them are created by Blue Sky, the company. The rest are created by users. So there's feeds like Ketchup Feed, where you can see the top posts in the last 24 hours, to a feed called the Science Feed, where scientists have curated their own space, and geologists, zoologists, oceanographers, they're the ones who decide what posts are verified and get to be on that feed, so it's actually true information.
Is there also an aspect of it which is to try and lower the temperature, to make it more warm, the content, and less aggressive?
We think it's very important that there's more tools for users to actually keep themselves safe. And right now, if you look at how moderation works on other social media platforms, it's basically one court system with 10,000 clerks trying to adjudicate issues across many communities and across the globe. That doesn't work. So what we believe is, how do we give people the tools to self-label, and they can go and work as a community to help each other with social norms. And so I think there's a whole level of decorum that's missing online from social relationships that we've left behind.
I wanted to play a clip of our conversation with Cenk Uygur, who joined the programme earlier. He was banned from entering the country earlier this week.
Of course, a sovereign country can make any decision it likes. So the Russians can decide to invade Ukraine. The Chinese can decide to put people in concentration camps. Or you could decide to do anything you want. But the question is, what should you do, especially a country like the United Kingdom, which is the home of freedom in a lot of ways, the home of the Magna Carta and Western civilization in a lot of ways. And does this look like freedom? And I have the same opinions on this issue that probably a great majority of British citizens have. So what's next? Are we going to take their freedom away next? You could have any kind of government you want, but it's up to the British citizens to decide what that government is, because you still live nominally for now in a democracy.
Ultimately, does free speech top all of the other concerns of people being in control of the process of removing the less palatable comments, if one can?
Yeah, I think there's a really big difference between freedom of speech and reach. And also, freedom of speech means something very different in each country. In the US, it's much more open. In the UK, if you are threatening violence publicly, you're no longer protected under free speech. And so I think it's really important for us to decide as a population what we mean and how we want society to be governed, and things will change over time. And I think that's the entire promise of Blue Sky. How do we give algorithms? How do we give feeds? How do we give identity? How do we give control back to the individual users and communities?
Can I just spin forward on a question on AI? Clearly, the debate of the last 20 years or 15 years on social media has centred around the fact that you and I can say what we like when we're talking to each other, and that's now translated online. And platforms have been able to say this is free speech. Individuals have said it. It's got nothing to do with the platform. Does AI change that? Does the answers and the comments that come out of AI get qualified as not free speech, but the answers of a company, of an algorithm, and thus can be held to account in a different way or not?
It's a good question. I think we're trying to figure this out as a world right now. I think what's generally interesting about AI from my point of view is AI leveling the playing field for builders. In the past, builders were people who were just technical. Now anybody who has an idea can go and build the thing they want to go build. I think AI used for content generation that produces slop is not a really interesting use of AI. I think AI and humans together, that's what becomes really exciting. And all these other corporations that are social media platforms are more AI companies than they are social. They're spending more money on compute than fixing the problems that they have messed up with society and trying to make it better for people online.
Just finally, with not that much time left, do you think that governments are going to get regulation of AI right, or is it wishful thinking?
regulation and innovation need to work together. I understand why people are tired and they need regulators to come in because these social media corporations have not listened to their people, have not listened to their users. But at the same time, oftentimes what happens with regulation is it benefits the big tech players because the compliance costs are so much expensive that smaller players like us with 40 people cannot go and compete with the big giants. So my ask for regulators is work with the small businesses. Let's work together to make more innovation and competition.
Rose, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with all of the day's top stories.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Good morning, it is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Will, very good morning from me as well.
The police watchdog urges people not to speculate about Henry Nowak's murder as Hampshire's Chief Constable rejects suggestions of two-tier policing.
Israel and Lebanon agreed to a ceasefire deal, which the US says is contingent on Hezbollah stopping attacks.
A lifeline for hundreds of women with ovarian cancer as a new treatment is approved for NHS use.
Also today, we will be speaking with Lord Mann as the government accepts his recommendations to tackle anti-Semitism.
And the alleged boss of one of Scotland's biggest organised crime gangs faces trial in Amsterdam after being arrested in Bali.
Very good morning to you. The UK's police watchdog has urged people not to speculate about the murder of Henry Nowak. The head of the Independent Office for Police Conduct says it could prejudice the investigation and risk Henry's family not getting the answers they deserve. Now, we want to show you the heartbreaking image of 18-year-old Henry in handcuffs after being fatally stabbed by his attacker who'd falsely accused him of racist abuse. We will be examining the impact of his murder on community division during the course of the programme. And at the centre of this tragedy, though, of course, is a grieving family who have called for Henry's death not to be used to create further tension or hatred. And that itself was a topic that came up in exchanges during Prime Minister's questions yesterday, in particular between the Prime Minister and Nigel Farage.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and ask for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable.
Now, the Chief Constable of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary has rejected claims of two-tier policing.
Part of what the IOPC will look at is what was in our minds at that time, what impacted the decisions we made. You know, that's got to run its course. What I would say, and I think where you're going there is, you know, do we have a two-tier type policing system? I would refute that. I would say absolutely not. I see officers day in, day out on the grounds serving without fear or favour all our communities. And I think that's the case nationally. I appreciate other people have a different view, but that's my view. So be really clear, I do not think policing is racist. There are racist individuals within policing, of course there are, and there have always been, and we will tackle that and deal with it. But it is not any anti-community.
Now, the former Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk, also joined us during the programme and says the guidance needs to be clear.
The concern here is that I think the police have been given muddled and unclear guidance. And by and large, they want to do the right thing, but they're sometimes confused about what the right thing is. And I think we should just be super clear, very bright lines, be fair, treat everyone equally. Don't see it as your job to try to reverse engineer societal problems or on the front line be trying to compensate for things that may have happened a long time ago in different countries.
We put the same question to Lucy Rigby, by the way, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Thousands of police officers that go out to work every day, putting themselves in harm's way to serve the public, to try and prevent crime and to keep us all safe. So I think that the suggestion, in light of that we have two-tier policing, which suggests at its heart that the police are, on a sort of systemic basis, putting the interests of one group above another, I genuinely think is a slur on all those police officers that are serving this country day and night, 7 days a week.
A little bit of breaking news that's just crossed us now. Actually, this is in relation to the protests that we saw, the disorder in Southampton on Tuesday in the wake of the murder of Henry Nowak. 2 people have been charged. Matt Styler, 50, has been charged with assaulting a police officer. Daniel Frost, 44, charged with violent disorder and possession of an offensive weapon.
We'll bring you any more developments on that to come. And more in the programme, of course, on this topic as well later on. Now, Keir Starmer's close cabinet ally, Darren Jones, told Lord Manderson he was so sorry to see him sacked as US ambassador in a WhatsApp messages that weren't released as part of the humble address, but were leaked to The Spectator. The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister previously said he no longer had access to messages he sent to Mandelson.
Well, let's talk to Ali, our political correspondent, here with us now. Look, there's a whole load of messages that have been released as part of this, some of them kind of gossipy, moaning about his cabinet colleagues or whatever. But there's one that actually stands out, right?
Yeah, that's right. This is a message that is going to haunt Darren Jones. I should say, you know, Darren Jones is in charge of the Cabinet Office, effectively, and that is the place where that's been kind of in charge of coordinating the release of these messages. Obviously, the Intelligence Security Committee have kind of overseen it, but he has a role in all this. So that, I think, is important context. But that message that you're talking about, this was to Peter Mandelson from Darren Jones on the day that Peter Mandelson lost his job. You've been doing such a great job and you worked wonders with Trump. I'm so sorry about today. So a senior minister saying he's so sorry on the day that the former US ambassador Peter Mandelson had to resign. I should say at that time, we obviously knew about the closeness of the relationship. I mean, we've known that for a long time, to the extent where he was sacked from his job. That wasn't the moment yet where we knew that Peter Mandelson had been leaking sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein. So just to be clear on what we did know and didn't. As you say, you know, there's other information in these messages saying that parts of government aren't firing on full cylinders, talking about him messaging Peter Mandelson about a reshuffle. But this is the bit that really, I think, stands out to me. He did apologise. It wasn't kind of directly to these messages, but it seemed like he might have known this was coming. This was in the House of Commons last night.
Did I, at best, subconsciously treat Peter Mandelson differently because I believed him to have influence and power within the Labour Party? And I think the answer to that question is yes, I did. Have I benefited from that relationship in the time I've been an elected politician? I think in part the answer to that question is yes, I did. And for that I'd like to apologise to the House, to the victims, to Lisa, and commit to then doing something about it.
So that was the apology from Darren Jones. I spoke to Lucy Rigby, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury this morning, and I have to say I was very struck by her uncomfortableness, I think, when talking about this, is probably fair to say. Let's just listen.
You asked me how I feel about that. Not great is the honest answer. My totally honest view, Sophie, is that this isn't a Westminster problem. This is frankly, what the Jeffrey Epstein saga reveals about gender dynamics right round the world, actually, but in particular involving some of the most powerful people in the world, in some cases allegedly, that makes me pretty angry.
This is, you know, the person that's taken over the job he used to have. And all are quite sort of centrist allies, central allies of Keir Starmer. They're not sort of potential threats to him.
Yeah, that's right. You know, this is one of her first weeks in the job, and I think you could see from her tone and her body language that she genuinely was, I think, quite angry by this. And I think, you know, it speaks to so much. I think it speaks to the question of what else don't we have? Were there messages? There's been reporting that there have been messages between Keir Starmer and Peter Mandelson after he was first appointed. You know, my understanding is that the two weren't particularly close. We know now that Keir Starmer did have disappearing messages. And my understanding is the reason we didn't get these messages from Darren Jones originally is because this was an old phone. He now has a new phone. And you spoke to Nick Thomas-Symonds. We have heard about Morgan McSweeney both having their phones stolen. So there are so many questions about what we haven't had. Also questions, and I have to say I've been in Parliament a lot this week, and lots of MPs think we're getting way too much information that's in the weeds that isn't important, that you should be able to message your colleagues, sort of slagging off other colleagues without thinking it's going to be on the front pages.
It's like we're getting the wrong stuff, but not the stuff we actually want, if that makes sense.
Well, it's also a particular problem that the person who's been responding for the government on the humble address, who's in charge of the Cabinet Office, didn't have his messages included. I mean, that doesn't really pass the sniff test. But in this general point, as I've been saying all week, we're in a crazy position now where there's so much that has been released that doesn't relate to Peter Mandelson. And, you know, what I think I step back and say to this is it's very difficult for us to ask questions and say, oh, it's outrageous that people use disappearing messages, and also maintain that it's OK for all of these messages to be released that have nothing to do with the issue at hand?
Yeah,
I mean, that is a difficult... I think we've got to push one way or the other and come up with a clear guidance going forward.
I think the way it's happened has just been quite messy, hasn't it? And I also think the other thing that's worth noting with all this is it kind of shows how Peter Mandelson has managed to worm his way into all different parts of government and... you know, they're talking about reshuffles. That's not his remit as US ambassador. So I think that's the other interesting takeaway for me.
Yeah, very true. Ali, thank you very much indeed.
Now, the US State Department has announced that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to renew their ceasefire. A truce was meant to be in place, of course, in April, but hostilities have continued since then.
So the statement from Israel and the US, a joint statement, says the deal is contingent on an end to fighting between Hezbollah and the Israeli military. It was brokered in talks in Washington. But look, here's the thing. Hezbollah hasn't agreed to the terms and wasn't even involved in the negotiations.
Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons has the latest for us.
It's significant that this ceasefire has been renewed, but it raises so many questions. When you have a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah is not involved in the negotiation of that, well, you don't have to be United Nations to work out that that's a fairly fundamental flaw. And Hezbollah has been pretty antagonistic towards these talks. So I think they are... The word fragile has been used for these ceasefires again and again, and this one definitely looks fragile. It's dependent, of course, upon the extent to which Iran, which funds and trains Hezbollah, is going to enforce it. But it's also vague, frankly, in actually what it says is going to happen on the ground. It talks about pilot areas where the Lebanese military will be in control. We don't know where they are. We don't really know what that control looks like. And we don't know how those would be arranged in southern Lebanon. There's no talk in this about a concrete timetable for Israel withdrawing from Lebanon. The Lebanese Health Ministry says that 3,500 people have been killed by Israel during this latest round of fighting, and that around 1 million people have been displaced. And of course, Israel is occupying a vast amount of land in Lebanon. And the ceasefire, as it is at the moment, has not stopped Israel killing people as recently as yesterday, and it hasn't stopped Hezbollah firing rockets towards northern Israel or drones towards Israeli soldiers. So, look, there's always that cliche that war is better than war. But there are so many questions that are unanswered that this, at the moment, feels like a triumph of optimism, but it does feel as if it is going to be fragile.
Adam Parsons there for us. Now, NHS staff could be banned from wearing political badges on their uniforms, like pro-Palestinian symbols, as part of a proposal to help tackle anti-Semitism in the health service.
So it's one of several recommendations in a review by the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann, who says the current system needs a major overhaul and Jewish patients and staff face, in his words, routine ostracism in the service.
Let's take a look at some of the recommendations. Well, the government says it's introducing mandatory anti-Semitism training for NHS leaders within 6 months. It's also bringing in clear national guidance on how staff should respond to racist behaviour from members of the public. And it'll also be publishing a new set of staff standards to better hold trusts to account, which will set minimum expectations for how organisations must prevent, respond to and learn from racist incidents.
We'll be talking to Lord Mann a bit later on in the programme. That's at 9:40. We'll be hearing from him directly.
We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to the Conservatives. Claire Coutinho joins us.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Thanks for joining us again. We're here now with the Shadow Energy Secretary, Claire Coutinho, talking on behalf of the Conservative Party. Good to have you with us today. We've been talking an awful lot on this programme about whether or not we have two-tier policing. Do you think we do?
Yes, I do think it's a huge problem. There's a race action plan at the moment which says that the police should treat ethnic minorities differently. That is clearly wrong. It's something we've been campaigning against. But it's not just within the police, it's across our public services. There has been an ideology that has taken hold which says that racism is the worst thing that can happen, but it's not the worst thing. You've seen, cases of murder, cases of child abuse, cases where the people who are meant to protect us from harm have not been able to do that job because they have been frightened of being called racist. So we have to root out that ideology and we have to let our public services do, which is often a very hard job, which is protect the public from harm.
What are these sort of specific examples that you give on that?
So you have the case of the Southport killer, where a head teacher said, I think something's going on here, and someone said, well, actually, I think it might be racist to identify this young black man as someone who's being associated with a knife crime, even though he was. You had the case of the Nottingham killer, where a person with a history of violence was not institutionalised. Why? Because the mental health services were frightened of being called racist. You had the Manchester bomber, where the security guard said, I felt like something was wrong, but I did not raise the alarm because I was scared of being called racist. You had the case of Sarah Sharif, a young girl in Surrey who died. And why? Because, again, the social services could spot something was wrong. She was being forced to wear a hijab to cover her injuries, and they did not want to raise the alarm because they were frightened of being called racist. So, yes, there are a number of these cases now, and it all comes back to this point. We are telling these public services to prioritise being seen to be anti-racist over doing their job. It is clouding their judgment, it is making their job harder.
So just to be really, because this is so important, right? But what exactly do you want to see happen? Are you calling for a changing in the guidance to show that everyone is treated equally under the law? Or are you saying that actually any diversity training should not be happening?
So there's all of these things. So we have campaigned against that race action plan. We think it is wrong. You should not treat ethnic minorities differently. Everyone should be treated the same when it comes to the law. You also need to reform the Equality Act, something we've been talking about, because, again, there are parts of that which tell public services to treat people differently. You also have to get rid of the Islamophobia definition that Labour have just brought in, that I have campaigned against, because, again, it is teaching public services to treat Muslims differently. Everybody should be treated the same when it comes to the law, when it comes to penalty, when it comes to privilege.
I totally understand what you're saying here, but I just wanted to add to the debate, because we're talking here about everyone being treated equally under the law, which I think is what everyone wants to see, right? But I guess part of the reason we have some of this guidance, and I accept that some of it looks like it is misguided, is because at the minute we don't have a society where people of every race are treated equally, right? And if you look at, if you're like a black kid growing up in the city, you're much more likely to be stopped and searched, for example. But there's other examples too, isn't there? Black women more likely to die during childbirth than white women because they're not being listened to. So is there a balance here to be struck if we really are trying to get to the place where everyone is treated equally?
Well, look, Kemi Badenoch did this work in government. She looked at racial disparities where things are going wrong. And the problem that you've got is the left want to say all of the reason that those things are going wrong is because of racism. That is not the case. It's not. I mean, take the education system. You have a system where black African children are doing well, black Caribbean children are not doing so well, but the left want to say the problem is racist teachers.
But there are some issues, aren't there? I mean, look at the NHS
you cannot
and childbirth
call
is a good...
everything racist.
I accept that entirely, but if you look at, for example, the NHS and the way that black women, I think, however many times more likely to die during childbirth, That can't be right, can it?
No, of course not. But then you should go and look at the evidence. Every single time there is a serious death in the NHS when it comes to maternity, you should look at the evidence. Is it because a black woman was not listened to? Is it because there is some other health factor happening that we need to go and change? And what you need to do is root out the ideology that says everything is racism. Actually, it might be other things. It might be that you're more susceptible to some other form of heart disease, whatever it might be, that is causing harm. And the problem that we've got is people are no longer able to be evidence-based and clear-eyed about this. And I'm afraid the dominant ideology, the real problematic ideology we have, is that the root cause of all of these differences is racism. That is not the case. And actually, Kemi did this work in government. She did a very good report with a guy called Tony Sewell, which looked at across the board why there were these differences happening. And he found that in the vast majority, it wasn't racism. And guess what? The left hounded him. They almost hounded him out of public life. So I think it is a real problem when ideology replaces evidence.
Just finally, I know you've got an announcement today on your brief. It's one of those weeks where, because of this absolutely shocking murder, it's something we've been focusing on, rightly, of course, but you've got an announcement on energy today, right?
Well, exactly, because one of the things that the government has pushed out this week is an increase in our net zero targets. But what we're seeing is that we're increasing the decarbonisation of the UK targets. But what we're not looking at is the fact that these targets are forcing policies which are killing off British industry. Those industries are dying. And what we're doing is replacing that production with production from China, from India, from the Middle East, places which do not have the same environmental standards. So we'll be laying an amendment to say the government has to measure the offshoring of emissions, these emissions that are simply moving abroad, because it's not good for the environment and it's not good for the economy.
OK, thank you very much, indeed, Claire Coutinho, speaking to us there.
Now, hundreds of women with advanced ovarian cancer are being offered a lifeline today with a new life-extending therapy approved for use.
It's the first new treatment for the disease to be added to the NHS in more than 20 years. So let's find out a bit more about it. Our correspondent Phoebe is here with us, so tell us more.
Well, about 7,500 women in the UK are diagnosed with ovarian cancer each year. And this drug is really aimed at 400 patients or so who have an advanced condition and they're struggling to treat it effectively. Advanced ovarian cancer is common. It's very hard to detect. People don't often notice the symptoms until they're at a latter stage. Chemotherapy is the first line of defence in these cases. Well, it has been for the last 20 years. This new drug is pioneering. It targets certain forms of ovarian, fallopian tube and peritoneal cancers, which are resistant to chemotherapy. It's targeted, so it's not scattergunning. It's targeting those cancer cells and killing them. It's a Trojan horse mechanism, very effective. Clinical trials have shown that women who are taking this drug can live on average about 4 months longer than they otherwise would. Well, the CEO of the Overcombe charity told us about this drug. This is what she said.
This treatment gives hope and quality of life and length of life to people at point of platinum resistance. So when the treatments that are available previously were just not working. But also it means that because this is the first ever treatment for platinum resistant ovarian cancer, it actually gives hope to the whole community.
Well, women being offered this drug will be offered a drip, which they take once every 3 weeks. So a groundbreaking treatment avenue here, opening up to hundreds of women who maybe had lost hope.
Yeah, it's amazing the progress in cancer treatment, it really is.
Phoebe, thanks so much. After the break, we're going to be talking to the former tank commander, military analyst Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. Welcome back to the huge changes in military technology that are taking place and tanks that redefined the 20th century battlefield may now not be the most important weaponry, with unmanned aerial drones rewriting the rules of combat. Delighted to say that joining us now is the former tank commander and military expert, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, who has released a new book, Tank Command, How the Tank Changed the Face of Battle. Hamish, great to have you in. And you've got this new book out, and we were just discussing this a little bit, but of all the times to be releasing a book about tanks, we wonder, because all we talk about all of a sudden is drones. Is that a fair sort of question to ask, or in fact is the tank as important as ever?
Well, thanks for having me. I think it absolutely is. The sort of strapline to my book is "The tank is dead, long live the tank." Ever since the first great tank battles in the First World War, people were writing them off. In the First World War, tank commanders were worried about Germans throwing hand grenades on top of tanks, so they built metal cages. We wind forward to Ukraine, and the FPV drones dropping hand grenades on tanks have been a massive issue. Again, we put metal cages on them. But the drone thing is really important, and I think it is not changing warfare, but it's changing the way we fight. And I think exactly as you said, with autonomous drones, be they in the air, in the sea, or on the land, that is probably where we're going with tanks as well.
Wow, so they won't need to be manned going forward, but we also often talk about, I mean, it's funny, with Iran, clearly there's not boots on the ground, from the West at least, but with Russia and Ukraine, it's the opposite. Is the tank critical to any clashes on the front line on the ground?
Well, I think it is, and it always has been. And that's the thing, over 109 years, the tank has endured like no other military capability, and it's always been at the forefront. In the First and Second Gulf Wars, which I were involved in, again, it was all about tanks. But now on the front line, and only sort of fairly recently, the Ukrainian tank commanders and tank crews have managed to, again, manoeuvre in this drone-infested sort of battlefield, and that is the key. But it's all about less. So you might have one manned tank with several drone tanks to it, and that's how we're seeing it develop. So I think there is still a requirement for a person in the link, but digitalisation is allowing us to do a lot more with a lot less.
And on the front line in Ukraine, there are drone tanks already?
Well, they're not so much drone, or it depends how you define it, but there are a lot of autonomous drone vehicles that have guns on them that are being directed by either a manned tank or something else. But I think in future, that is exactly what we'll see. We're only getting 148 Challenger 3s, which I test drove the other day, which I think are brilliant. But I'm assuming they will be supplemented by lots of drones operating to them, and that is how we'll create military effect on the future battlefields.
The tank you referenced there that you tested, is that the Ajax tank that has got a lot of criticism since coming out, or is it a different tank?
Well, it's different. I've test drove both recently. Okay. So the Ajax light tank, it's a recce vehicle, a lot of criticism, but actually its turret is the best in the world. It's all about digitisation. So the Ajax can control lots of different drones, has fantastic what we call hard kill anti-drone suite. So the mass drones that we see destroying tanks on the battlefield, actually Ajax has the ability to neutralise them and control a lot of other drones. So it's had its issues, but actually I understand they're being resolved. But the technology that Ajax has is exactly what we require on the future battlefield.
So you're striking quite an optimistic tone. I mean, obviously we still await the Defence Investment Plan. Are you optimistic that when it comes we're going to get this right, and that the necessities we need as a country for the next decade or longer when it comes to defence, that we can deliver?
Well, if the Defence Investment Plan realises the Strategic Defence Review, which was published last year, which shows what our military is going to look like, and it directed that 80% of the lethality would come from drones, if it invests that, yeah, I am confident that although we're small, if it's properly invested, 5% of GDP a year, we will have a conventional deterrence, and that's what it's all about. We didn't have a conventional deterrence until now, which I think is why Putin invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022. But if the government properly fund SDR with the Defence Investment Plan, then, yeah, we have a good start to go forward for our military capability and deterrence.
In terms of the kind of direction of travel with our military versus working with others, How far away are we from being able to defend ourselves, as it were, versus relying on others? And can it realistically shift from the US to a suite of European partners?
Well, I think absolutely we need partnerships, and the NATO European countries are exactly the people who work together. Now, we can no longer take the Americans for granted, but Europe is heavily reinvesting in its military. Germans are spending over 200 billion on their military over the next few years. So if everybody invests properly and we realise we learn the right lessons from Ukraine, then I think we'll have a capability. But I suppose the final thing I'm saying, I'm sure in 100 years from now, somebody like me will be talking to somebody like you about something called a tank.
Very, very interesting. Well, why don't we just leave it there? Hamish, great conclusion to a very interesting conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hamish de Bretton, Gordon, former tank commander and author of the new book, Tank Command, How the Tank Changed the Face of Battle.
Now, the alleged boss of one of Scotland's largest gangs is due to appear in court in Amsterdam later on today. Stephen Lyons is wanted in Spain over his involvement in an alleged international criminal network linked to drug trafficking and money laundering across Europe, the Middle East and Asia. Here's Conor Gillies.
This is Stephen Lyons, a Scottish man authorities across Europe accuse of running a global criminal empire linked to drug trafficking, money laundering and organised crime networks stretching from Glasgow to Spain, Dubai, Turkey and Asia. Spanish investigators claim the Lyons crime clan moved millions through shell companies, cryptocurrency, luxury assets and international drug routes. Sources say they are one of the biggest players in European organised crime. After a 3-year investigation, raids exploded across multiple countries. And then came the arrest. Lyons was stopped at an airport in Bali after landing from Singapore. An Interpol fugitive captured on the other side of the world. He was deported here to the Netherlands under a European arrest warrant issued by Spain. And now Amsterdam becomes the centre of Europe's biggest organised crime cases. Dutch judges are deciding whether Stephen Lyons will be extradited to Spain. And that is why this hearing is happening here. The case is tied to the violent Lyons family feud that's dominated the underworld for more than 20 years. Shootings, executions in Asda car parks in Scotland, international alliances. Last year, Lyons' younger brother, Eddie Lyons Jr., was shot dead in a beachfront bar on the Costa del Sol. Sky News cameras are getting access inside this court as the most wanted man faces the next stage of a case gripping police forces across this continent.
Returning now to the issue of anti-Semitism and the recent rise in violence towards members of the UK's Jewish community.
Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland was given access to Shomrin, a volunteer patrol group in North London who've been stepping in to try and diffuse tense situations in their neighbourhood. Here's her report.
Any more units available to back up 2-2 and 4-4? It's getting a bit heated over there.
With anti-Semitism surging, we're scrambling to a call for help.
A lady, she's been locked in and victim of anti-Semitic abuse, and she's extremely anxious.
These men are not police officers, but North West London volunteers with the Jewish community support group Shomrim, the Hebrew word for guards. We arrived to find two versions of events. The husband of the Jewish woman has dashed to the scene, afraid for the safety of his wife and young child. He wouldn't speak on camera, scared of what he called an anti-Semitic mob, but told us his wife was taunted about a recent arson attack on Jewish ambulances. Two men and a woman say they weren't blocking her in, but had broken down. They denied making anti-Semitic comments, but seemed annoyed by one of the Jewish men who allegedly referred to Shomrim as our police, though this is disputed. It's a tense atmosphere, which ultimately is diffused, and the Jewish woman manages to drive off.
The reason why she called was because he said, you Jews think that you could do whatever you want, and that's why your ambulances were burnt down. I just want to see if the car's still stuck.
So we're just going back actually to see whether the broken down car has
now moved or not. It's about 6 minutes since we pulled away. Let's see.
Magic. The car's gone to the side. Now, who's saying the truth? That may be quite telling.
Just to kind of spell it out, what you're saying is because the car is gone 6 minutes later, that you say that that vehicle was being deliberately parked there to block that woman in and intimidate her.
100%, and with vile anti-Semitic comments.
Volunteer Ben Grosnas is a luxury furniture salesman. Avi Ball works in online sales, but was one of the first on the scene at a double stabbing a few months ago. As we drive round Golders Green, it's clear how nervous people are. Just a few hours before we went on patrol with Shom Rim, a major fire saw them inundated with calls.
Literally just people worried, obviously speculating if it is or isn't terror-related. And the anxiety, do I send my children to school today? What advice can you give us? And it turns out afterwards, the preliminary is that it's an electrical fault. But the stress...
They've called us over.
We've been flagged down. Tempers are flaring at the side of the road.
There's nothing wrong in public recording.
A Jewish man has been accused of taking pictures of a Muslim cleric, which he denies.
Do you think that some people who aren't Jewish feel a little bit intimidated by the Shom Rim?
Absolutely not. We, across board, are called by anyone. You don't have to be Jewish to call us.
Perhaps some members of the Muslim community might feel a bit awkward when you show up. I mean, how do you think that might...
We just spoke to that imam over there, and he was very happy to speak to us and very happy that we diffused the situation.
All this in just over an hour in one part of London. Volunteers doing their bit to try to keep a lid on simmering community tensions and record levels of anti-Semitism. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Golders Green.
As we mentioned, we're going to be talking to Lord Mann in just a few moments. It's been a little bit delayed, but we'll be joined by him shortly. In the meantime, let's have a look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, it's been unsettled, a bit cooler, and that is set to continue into next week, bringing some strong winds and further heavy showers and longer spells of rain. There will be some sunny spells and widespread, locally heavy and blustery showers this morning. Some will be quite long-lasting. They'll be concentrated in the north and west at first, developing more widely across southern and eastern parts by midday and bringing a risk of hail and thunder. It will be pretty cool for early summer, I have to say, with a stiff wind making it feel even cooler for lots of people.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
We will speak to Lord Mann next. Are we going to the break? So we are going to the break. Apologies, didn't know if we were going to him directly or after the break. We'll take a quick break and we'll speak to Lord Mann.
Hello, it's 7 o'clock. This is the Kathy Newman Show. How long's the 5 million going to last, Mr. Farage? Let's find out. Diane, who would you put in there?
It's not for me to say. I want to see.
Not just accused
not
of
you.
Do you ever look at yourself and think, are you the problem?
I do feel sorry for him, yeah.
We'll see what happens. Does it mean, frankly, that you are an irrelevant? Great to have this lovely couple on the sofa.
I know, what a dream team they are.
She's christened a couch.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Were you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Welcome back. The government is proposing to introduce new recommendations, including banning political badges on NHS uniforms in a bid to tackle anti-Semitism in the health service.
So it's one of several suggestions by the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann, who we're very pleased to say joins us now from University College Hospital in London. Thank you very much for being with us. So first things first, what is it you're recommending?
You're welcome. What I'm recommending is that there's some leadership from the NHS, and the NHS as an employer takes hold of this issue and turns it round, which I think is very possible to do. So I've given 30 very pragmatic recommendations for them to sort the situation out. I think it's no big deal for them to do it, and I'm looking forward, now the government's accepted my report, to seeing this implemented across the whole of the NHS.
Including, for example, no political badges being allowed to be worn, is that right?
Indeed. If I'm sat in the dentist chair and the dentist's about to drill my teeth, I don't expect the dentist to have political badges on. Even, I'm in the Labour Party, even a Labour Party badge, I might like that, but you might not like it. That's not appropriate. And so a badge that says I support Palestine, or indeed a badge that says I support Israel, I don't want my dentist to be wearing that when they're about to drill my teeth. And it's very straightforward policy, and I think that should be and will be the policy across the NHS. Get the political politicking out of the NHS, out of the hospital and health environment, because what Jewish patients have told me, and I've spoken to very large numbers, is that's more than off-putting. That's sometimes stopping people from using the NHS.
There's this legal action that some NHS workers are bringing against Bart's NHS Trust in London over that ban. And they are worried that it disproportionately affects people who are trying to express pro-Palestinian views or empathy with the suffering that they are seeing in Gaza. I mean, what would you say to that?
We might disproportionately impact Labour Party members if they're not wearing a Labour Party badge at work or any other political sloganing. Why would somebody in their employer's time dealing with patients want to be pushing their politics? If you want to have politics, I've got strong political views, I've been in politics all my life, then express them in your private life, express them as a private individual, but don't use the NHS to do it. Indeed, further, you shouldn't be using, and I've recommended this, the NHS logo and symbolism on your social media. Do it as yourself. Don't try and suggest that NHS is associated with whatever your views are, whether their views I would wholeheartedly agree with, or whether their views I regard as abhorrent. That's not inclusive. And it's not inclusive of the Jewish community or indeed any other community when you're doing that.
How, Lord Mayor, do you define what is a political view? I mean, this is a little bit facetious, just to state the obvious. I mean, I presume it's OK to have an Arsenal flag up in your office at work?
No, I don't think if someone's wearing an Arsenal badge on their uniform, that would be appropriate. That's not a political view. So you're in a grey area there. But, you know, what if I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan? If I'm at a point of vulnerability, and the dental chair's a very good example of this, then I'm not sure I want my dentist wearing a badge of a football team that I'm not in support of. And you know, the NHS, it's an unnecessary distraction. But that distraction, if you have an invasive procedure carried out on you, and you move at the wrong time, or you're shaking, you're worried and you're scared, which you may well be anyway, then that can be medically dangerous. So that kind of distraction of politics and political slogans, it's very straightforward. I've given 2 examples. I am saying I support Palestine, I love Israel. That kind of badge should not be worn by dentists, by doctors, by NHS staff, and I'm pleased that the government says it's accepting my recommendations.
Another one of your recommendations is mandatory anti-racism training in anti-Semitism. And I was interested to ask you about this with the background of the Henry Nowak case, because there has been, of course, a lot of debate about whether mandatory discrimination training is actually having an adverse effect if it's not leading to everybody being treated equally. What's your view on that?
Well, an NHS staff member in a hospital, let's say a nurse in a hospital, needs to understand what the Jewish way of life is. Let me put that really simply. Jewish people do not eat ham. To offer someone a ham sandwich in a hospital bed is not appropriate. It'll be turned down. That patient may well, and that's the experience I'm finding, suffer in silence and eat nothing at all. Well, that kind of basic level understanding is essential. I am recommending that. It's done across the NHS, in some places extremely well, including at University College London. That should be across the whole of the NHS. And in particular, I am recommending that the regulators and the leading NHS managers be trained in understanding what is anti-Semitism, how to deal with it, and how the Jewish way of life, such as kosher food and how what Jewish people eat, that basic level of understanding is there. That is essential. And so I'm repeat that recommendation today. I'm insisting that that happens.
It's really, really interesting. Is there a recommendation, should that be extended to have a good knowledge and understanding of all cultures and religions and the restrictions that may apply?
So the point I've made in my report is, I'm not asking for special privileges for the Jewish community. Jewish community is no more important than anybody else, but neither is it any less important. I'm just calling for very matter-of-fact, mundane systems in place so that the Jewish community can get on with its life and use our NHS without any fear, without any hassle when people go in. And if there is a problem, good systems for ensuring those problems are sorted. But when it gets to the extreme, the man who told me, working as the only Jewish person in his workplace, that when he turns up for work, bacon fat has been smeared across his locker. That's soul-destroying for someone. He suffered in silence. That's obviously not acceptable, but that's where this leads if you don't have trust in the systems. So that basic level of understanding is essential, but what I'm suggesting should apply to all groups, that all groups should feel, if they're working in the NHS and as patients of the NHS, that they should be included and the NHS is for them, bar none.
Can I ask about free speech, Lord Mayor? We had Cenk Uygur on the show earlier. As I'm sure you'll be aware, he was banned from entering, or barred from entering, the UK earlier this week. Where do you stand on that and the importance of free speech?
Well, I'm in favour of free speech. I've long been in favour of free speech. I've argued, including in terms of legislation, in terms of free speech. But free speech doesn't mean the right to incite violence or incite terrorism, and so sometimes people will be stopped in the way they're saying things. But also included in the NHS. If you're a staff member of the NHS and you have strong views, go have those strong views in the public sphere. Just don't drag the NHS into it and the NHS logo and your NHS position. That's what I'm recommending in relation to the NHS. And frankly, if we take the issue that I have to spend too much of my time on, what's happening in the consequences of the Middle East, frankly, whether you're anti-Israel, pro-Israel or anything else related to those issues, have your views strongly, express your views, but don't use the NHS as part of that. Allow the workplace to be a place where people can get on and do their job without all that kind of hassle in front of them. And it seems to me that's a rather reasonable and moderate thing to be proposed, and that's what I am proposing.
John Mann, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme today.
Thank you.
Now, Elon Musk is on track to become the world's first trillionaire. This all comes because SpaceX, his company, is set to raise some $75 billion when it makes its stock market debut next Friday. So they are raising $75 billion from investors, which will value the company as a whole, because they're only selling a small portion of it, at $1.77 trillion. Comfortably the biggest IPO of all time.
I cannot get my head around a trillion. So I tried to, right? 1 million seconds equates to 11.5 days. 1 billion seconds is 31.7 years. A trillion seconds, get this, is 31,700 years. I mean, that just puts, I think, the scale of this valuation into context.
Yeah, and look, I think, forget what it does to Elon Musk's personal wealth. For the company as a whole, for the first time it's gone public, the first time shares will be available to you or I or anyone to buy or trade. We've never had anything of this scale at all, where on day one, it's worth that amount. And I think it's not just the absolute size that I think people need to be wary of. It's the relative size of the company compared to its revenues and its profits. It only made $20 billion of revenue last year. 20 billion. And you're talking about a nearly $2 trillion multiple. So there's an enormous amount of hope value built in. Buyer beware. We're out of time.
Wild. Thanks for being with us. See you next week.